The ink is as dark as a moonless night, waiting for the brush to tell a story that will change the world. In the heart of Tokyo, within the high, silent walls of the imperial palace, the air is thick with the scent of pine soot and the heavy, humid breath of a city that does not yet know it is standing on the edge of a precipice. Here, the world is reduced to the soft, rhythmic sound of a stone grinding against an ink stick. It is a slow, meditative circle, round and round, a motion that has been repeated by scholars and poets for 1,000 years. But tonight, the man holding the inkstick is not a poet. He is a man whose signature carries the weight of millions of lives, though his name will remain a whisper in the corridors of history. Saburo sits on the floor, his knees resting on the woven tatami mat. He can feel the slight chill of the December evening seeping through the sliding paper screens, but his hands are warm. For hours, the halls outside this room have been filled with the sharp, clipped sounds of military boots and the frantic rustle of maps being unrolled. He has heard the voices of men who speak of destiny and steel, of rising suns and inevitable storms. But in this small, private room, there is only the silence and the ink. He looks at the white scroll laid out before him. It is so clean, so empty. It represents a future that has not yet been written. In his pocket, Saburo carries a small, crumpled letter from his wife, Hannah. She wrote to him of the plum blossoms that are starting to show their stubborn beauty in the cold, and of their son, who has just learned to tie his own sandals. These are the small, fragile things that occupy Saburo's mind as he prepares to write. He thinks of the millions of other sons, and cities he has never visited, who are also sleeping, unaware of the ink and the brush. The tension of the day has been like a wire pulled too tight, vibrating with a high, anxious note. There were orders ready to be sent, orders that would send planes into the sky and ships across the vast, dark expanse of the Pacific. The world expected a roar. The generals expected a fire. But as Saburo dips his brush into the well of darkness he has created, he feels a strange, sudden calm. It is the peace that comes when a fever finally breaks. His hand does not shake. This is a small miracle, for he is an old man, and the burden he carries is enough to break the strongest back. He remembers his father teaching him calligraphy when he was a boy, telling him that the brush is an extension of the soul. If the soul is clouded, the character will be blurred. If the soul is certain, the line will be true. Saburo breathes in deeply, the cool air filling his lungs, and he chooses a word. He does not write of war. He does not write of finality. Instead, he crafts a message of delay. A request for one more day of talk. One more hour of patience. A suggestion that the sun need not rise on a world in flames just yet. As the tip of the brush touches the paper, the sound is no louder than a sigh. Shoo! The ink flows, biting into the fibers of the scroll. It is a beautiful, fluid motion. To an observer, it is just a series of black marks on a white field, but to the future, it is a bridge. It is a choice to let the ship stay their course without launching their cargo of grief. It is a choice to let the sailors in Hawaii keep sleeping, dreaming of their homes in the wheat fields of Kansas or the hills of Virginia. Outside the palace, the city of Tokyo is beginning to quiet down. In the narrow alleys, the steam rises from noodle shops where tired workers share a final bowl of broth before heading home. There is a gentleness to the evening. A bicycle bell rings in the distance, a lonely, silver sound that drifts through the mist. Saburo thinks of these people. He thinks of the way the light looks in the windows of the wooden houses, and the way mothers tuck blankets around their children's shoulders. He realizes that heroism is not always found in the heat of battle. Sometimes, it is found in the quiet refusal to let the battle begin. The message is finished. Saburo sets the brush down on its porcelain rest. He watches the ink as it loses its wet luster, turning into a soft, permanent mat. It is done. The orders for the morning have been changed. The storm has been asked to wait. He knows that his colleagues will be angry. He knows that there will be questions in the morning. and perhaps consequences that he will have to face alone. But as he looks at the word he has written, the word for patience, he feels a lightness in his chest that he hasn't felt in years. He stands up slowly, his joints popping in the stillness. He walks to the shoji screen and slides it open just a crack. The garden is bathed in the blue light of the moon. The stone lanterns are dusted with a light frost, and the koi in the pond are dark shadows moving slowly beneath the surface of the water. Everything is in its place. The world is still whole. He thinks of the American diplomats across the sea, perhaps sitting in similar rooms, tired and gray-haired, staring at their own telephones and telegrams. He wonders if they can feel the shift in the air, the way the pulse of the world has slowed down. He hopes that they, too, are thinking of plum blossoms and children's sandals. He hopes that they can hear the silence of the Pacific and recognize it for the gift that it is. In the barracks, the young pilots are resting. Their flight suits are laid out, their goggles polished. They have been told they are part of a great turning wheel of history. They are brave, and they are ready to give everything they have. Saburo wishes he could go to each of them and whisper that their lives have been given back to them, at least for now. He wishes he could tell them that they will see the spring, and the summer, and the autumn. That they will grow old and tell stories to their grandchildren about the night the world held its breath and nothing happened. The palace clocks chime the hour, a deep, resonant sound that vibrates in the floorboards. It is late, very late. The shadows in the room seem to grow softer, wrapping around Saburo like a warm cloak. He sits back down and picks up the letter from Hannah. He reads it again by the dim light of a single candle. She asks him to come home soon. She says the house feels too big without him, and that the tea tastes bitter when he isn't there to share it. He smiles, a slow, weary curve of the lips. Tomorrow will be a day of difficult conversations. There will be shouting and there will be fear. But the sun will rise over an ocean that is not stained with oil and blood. The ships will continue to bob in the harbor, their hulls clinking against the piers. The shops will open, the children will go to school, and the mundane, beautiful routine of life will continue, unbroken. Saburo blows out the candle. The smoke rises in a thin, gray ribbon, dancing for a moment before disappearing into the darkness. He closes his eyes and listens to the sound of his own breathing. It is steady. It is peaceful. He has used the weight of the brush to lift the weight of the world. As sleep finally begins to find him, his last thought is of the ink, drying on the scroll, holding back the tide, keeping the morning safe for everyone who dreams. Far away, across thousands of miles of salt water, the waves continue to lap against the shores of an island called Oahu. The palm trees sway in a gentle breeze, and the stars remain bright and clear in the tropical sky. There is no sound of engines in the clouds. There is no smell of smoke on the wind. There is only the vast, rhythmic breathing of the sea. The world is at rest, and for this one night, the story of humanity is one of mercy, written in a steady hand, by a man who decided that the ink was more powerful than the sword. Sleep now, for the horizon is clear. The morning will bring the sun, and nothing more. The quiet resilience of a single soul has kept the darkness at bay, and the world remains a place of possibilities, of unwritten chapters, and of long, peaceful Sundays. The brush is at rest. The ink is dry. And we are all, for a little while longer, safe in the soft embrace of the silence. The morning is a secret shared only between the sea and the sky, a soft blue promise that the world is, for now, exactly as it should be. In the harbor of Honolulu, the light of the rising sun is a pale gold ribbon, unfurling slowly across the surface of the water. It doesn't arrive with a shout or a flash, it arrives with a whisper, touching the steel hulls of the great ships with a warmth that feels almost like a blessing. This is a Sunday that remains whole, a day that will not be shattered, but will instead be gathered up, hour by hour, like a collection of sea glass found upon the shore. Down in the belly of one of those sleeping giants, a young man named Elias is waking up. He is 19 years old, with eyes that still carry the wide-open wonder of the Nebraska plains. He doesn't move quickly. There is no urgency in the air, no sharp whistle calling him to a post of fire and smoke. Instead, there is only the low, rhythmic hum of the ship's breathing, the sound of fans turning lazily, the distant clink of a coffee mug against a metal table, and the soft, collective sigh of hundreds of men dreaming of home. Elias sits on the edge of his bunk, his bare feet touching the cool floor. He reaches into a small wooden locker and pulls out a tin box. Inside, there is a stack of stationery, a fountain pen, and a photograph of a girl with a ribbon in her hair. Today, Elias does not have to man a gun. He does not have to run through a rain of steel. Today, his only mission is to find the right words to tell his mother that he is safe, that he is well, and that he misses the smell of damp earth after a summer rain. He makes his way to a quiet corner of the mess hall, near a porthole where the light is beginning to pour in like warm honey. The air smells of salt, of floor wax, and of the faint, comforting scent of rising bread coming from the galley. He unscrews the cap of his pen and stares at the blank white page. In another world, this page might have been lost to the waves, charred by a fire that never went out. But here, in this unbroken morning, it is a canvas for a life that is allowed to continue. Dear Ma, he writes, his hand moving slowly, deliberately. I hope the cold isn't biting too hard back home. I saw a bird today I didn't recognize, bright red, like a cardinal but smaller, darting through the hibiscus flowers near the pier. It made me think of your garden. He pauses, watching a speck of dust dance in a shaft of sunlight. He thinks about how strange it is to be so far away from the place where he grew up, yet to feel so profoundly at peace. There had been rumors, of course. Whispers in the hallways about shadows moving across the Pacific, about tensions that might snap like a dry twig. But this morning, those whispers have faded into the background, drowned out by the gentle, lapping sound of the tide against the hull. The world has chosen to breathe instead of scream. Outside, on the deck, the morning air is sweet and heavy with the scent of tropical flowers drifting over from the shore. A few sailors are leaning against the railing, their shoulders relaxed, watching the small fishing boats head out toward the reef. There is a kindness in their silence. One man shares a piece of dried fruit with a friend, another hums a low, bluesy tune that he heard on the radio the night before. These are the small, everyday heroisms of a world at peace, the choice to be gentle, the choice to be still, the choice to simply exist in the company of others without fear. Across the water, the church bells of Honolulu begin to chime. It is a silver sound, thin and clear, traveling through the humid air to reach the ears of the men on the ships. The bells aren't a warning, they are an invitation. They speak of slow walks to the cathedral, of starched white shirts and the soft rustle of hymnal pages. They speak of a community that is waking up to a day of rest, a day where the biggest worry is whether the afternoon sun will be too hot for a picnic under the banyan trees. Elias hears the bells and smiles. He thinks of the girl in the photograph, Sarah. He wonders what she is doing at this very moment. Perhaps she is walking to the post office, hoping for a letter that is currently being written in a patch of sunlight thousands of miles away. He describes the water for her, trying to capture the way it changes from turquoise to a deep, royal blue as the sun climbs higher. He tells her about the taste of a pineapple he bought from a street vendor, how it was so sweet it made his teeth ache, a sharp, vibrant contrast to the canned peaches they used to eat on the porch back home. He doesn't write about the cannons. He doesn't write about the drills or the steel. He writes about the way the light hits the palm fronds on the shore, making them look like emerald feathers. He writes about a dream he had where they were dancing in a barn, the air thick with the scent of hay and the sound of a fiddle. These are the things that matter on an unbroken Sunday. These are the threads that hold a life together when the tapestry of history isn't being torn apart. As he writes, a shadow passes over the porthole. For a heartbeat, there is a flicker of something old and primal in the back of his mind, a brief, cold shiver of what might have been. But when he looks up, it is only a large, white seabird, its wings spread wide as it glides effortlessly on a thermal. It isn't a plane. It isn't a harbinger of doom. It is just a living thing, enjoying the gift of the wind. Elias finishes his letter and blows gently on the ink to dry it. He folds the paper with care, tucking it into an envelope and pressing it shut. He feels a quiet sense of accomplishment, as if he has successfully defended something precious. And in a way, he has. He has defended his own humanity. He has spent his morning nurturing a connection to the people he loves, rather than preparing to destroy people he has never met. The harbor is fully awake now, but the peace remains. It is a busy, bustling kind of quiet. There is the sound of a distant whistle, the calling of gulls, and the low rumble of a truck moving along the docks. But beneath it all, there is a foundation of safety. The sailors begin to move toward the mess hall for a late breakfast, their voices soft and easy, their laughter genuine. There is no shadow hanging over them, no sense of a clock ticking down to a moment of no return. In this world, the Sunday of December remains a day of ordinary beauty. It is a day of long naps in the shade, of letters home, and of quiet reflections on the vastness of the sea. It is a day where the only thing falling from the sky is the gentle warmth of the sun. Elias walks out onto the deck, the envelope tucked safely in his pocket. He breathes in the salt air, feeling the vibration of the ship beneath his feet, not as a weapon of war, but as a temporary home, a floating village of young men who are being allowed to grow old. He looks out toward the horizon, where the blue of the water meets the blue of the sky in a seamless, infinite line. There are no smoke plumes on that horizon. There are no rising suns of fire. There is only the light. He finds a spot in the shade of a lifeboat and sits down, leaning his head back against the warm metal. He closes his eyes and listens. He listens to the bells, the birds, and the breathing of the sea. He thinks about how lucky he is to be exactly where he is, at exactly this moment. He doesn't know that in another timeline, his name would be etched into a monument of cold stone. He only knows that the sun feels good on his skin, and that tomorrow is another day. The morning flows into the afternoon like a slow, winding river. The peace of the harbor is not a fragile thing here, it is thick and resilient, woven into the very fabric of the day. It is the peace of a father teaching his son to fish from the pier. It is the peace of a nurse reading a book in the garden of the naval hospital. It is the peace of an unbroken Sunday, a gift given to a world that, for once, decided to wait. And so, the sailors of the Pacific continue their quiet lives. They write their letters, they dream their dreams, and they watch the stars come out, one by one, over a sea that remains a bridge instead of a battlefield. The world is a lullaby, and for now, the music does not stop. We leave Elias there, resting in the golden light, a young man with a letter in his pocket and a whole life ahead of him, in a world where the morning was allowed to remain just a morning, and the sun was allowed to set on a harbor that was still at peace. In the heart of the city of marble and monuments, the clocks tick with a heavy, rhythmic heartbeat that seems to echo through the long, shadowed hallways of power. It is a winter morning in Washington, and the air inside the State Department is thick with the scent of stale tobacco, cedar wood, and the quiet, electric hum of waiting. Outside, the trees are bare skeletons against a gray, milk-colored sky, but inside, the world is compressed into the tiny, frantic clicks of telegraph machines and the soft, melodic clinking of tea sets. In a small, cluttered office tucked away from the grand ballrooms, a woman named Margaret sits at her desk. She is a woman who lives in the spaces between words, a translator whose days are spent deciphering the elegant, flowing scripts of a world half ocean away. Her fingers are stained with the faint violet hue of typewriter ribbon, and her eyes are weary from a night spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if the morning would bring a sound she could never unhear. She, like so many in this city, had been holding her breath for weeks, waiting for a telegram that would change the language of her life from peace to something much darker. But as the sun struggles to climb above the Potomac, the expected telegram does not arrive. There is no sharp, jagged news of fire. There is no sudden, terrifying silence from the Pacific. Instead, there is only the no news that feels, in its own way, like a miracle. Margaret reaches for her teacup, her hand trembling just enough to make the china rattle against the saucer. It is a small sound, but in the hush of the office, it feels as loud as a bell. Beside her, a young clerk named Arthur is leaning back in his chair, his tie loosened, staring at a stack of papers that have suddenly lost their urgency. They look at each other, a brief, fleeting glance that says everything they are not allowed to speak aloud. It is a look of profound, heavy relief, the kind that settles in the marrow of the bones and makes the shoulders drop an inch lower. The tea is still warm, Arthur whispers, his voice rasping slightly from a night of coffee and cigarettes. It is a simple observation, a small anchor in the drifting uncertainty of the morning, but it carries the weight of a prayer. In this room, the continuation of the mundane is a victory. The fact that the water is still boiling, that the leaves are still steeping, and that they are still here to notice it, feels like a gift they haven't quite earned but are desperately grateful to receive. Across the hall, in the larger telegraph rooms, the machines continue their steady, rhythmic chattering. Normally, the sound is a source of anxiety, a relentless reminder of a world in turmoil. But today, the rhythm feels different. It is a lullaby of the ordinary. The messages coming through are boring, beautiful things, inquiries about trade shipments of silk, diplomatic pleasantries about weather and health, and administrative notes that would usually be ignored. Today, these scraps of paper are treated like precious artifacts. They are proof that the world is still turning on its axis, that the thread has not yet snapped. Margaret picks up a telegram that has just been decoded. It is a message from a minor consulate, asking for clarification on a shipping manifest for tea leaves. She reads the words slowly, savoring the lack of drama in them. She imagines the person who sent it, perhaps a man sitting in a humid office in a distant port, swatting at a fly and thinking about his lunch. He doesn't know that his mundane question has brought a moment of stillness to a woman in Washington. He doesn't know that his tea leaves have become a symbol of a world that chose to keep talking instead of screaming. She begins to type the response, the steady tap-tap-tap of the keys blending with the sound of the rain beginning to fall against the window pane. The rain is soft, a gentle gray veil that blurs the sharp edges of the city. It washes the dust from the statues and turns the streets into shimmering rivers of silver. Inside the office, the heat from the radiator hisses and clucks, a warm, domestic sound that makes Margaret think of her own home, of the cat sleeping on the rug and the smell of lavender in her linen closet. She realizes that she had been mourning these things in advance, preparing herself for a world where they would no longer matter. But now, they matter more than ever. In the hallways, the usual frantic pace has slowed to a thoughtful drift. Men in dark suits stop to talk to one another, not in hushed, urgent tones, but with a slow, wandering ease. They talk about their families, about the football scores, about the best place to get a warm coat for the coming winter. The fear that had been a constant companion for months hasn't vanished, but it has retreated into the corners, replaced by a quiet, shared resilience. It is the heroism of the civil servant, the quiet determination to keep the gears of peace turning, even when the machine feels like it is about to break. Arthur stands up and walks to the window, watching the umbrellas bloom like dark flowers on the sidewalk below. "My sister is getting married in June," he says, almost to himself. "I wasn't sure if I'd be able to go. I thought I'd be somewhere else by then." He doesn't say where somewhere else would be, but the word hangs in the air, a shadow of a uniform and a trench that has, for today, been dispelled. Margaret nods, her heart aching with a sudden, sharp tenderness for this young man, for his sister, and for the June wedding that is once again a certainty. "You should wear the blue suit," she says softly. "The one you bought last spring. It suits you." They share a small, fragile laugh, a sound that feels out of place in a building dedicated to the stern business of nations, yet it is the most important thing in the room. This is the human cost of the what if, not just the lives saved, but the futures restored. The weddings that will happen, the children who will be born, the letters that will continue to be about tea leaves instead of casualty lists. The afternoon begins to fade into a long, purple twilight. The lamps on the desks are turned on, casting warm circles of amber light across the mahogany surfaces. The smoky air settles, the blue haze of tobacco dancing in the glow. Margaret finishes her last translation for the day. It is a letter from a diplomat's wife, thanking a colleague for a gift of a small, hand-painted fan. It is a letter of grace and etiquette, a reminder that even in the highest circles of power, life is made of small gestures and quiet kindnesses. As she prepares to leave, she takes a moment to look around the office. The piles of paper, the overflowing ashtrays, the half-empty teacups, it all looks different now. It looks like a sanctuary. This room, with all its clutter and weariness, is a place where the storm was weathered by simply continuing to exist. She puts on her hat and coat, the wool feeling heavy and protective against her skin. She says goodnight to Arthur, who is already starting on a new pot of coffee, his face no longer pale with exhaustion but bright with a quiet, steady focus. He has decided to stay late, not because he has to, but because he wants to be there, just in case the silence needs a witness. Walking out into the cool Washington evening, Margaret feels the damp air on her face. The city is beautiful in the rain, the lights of the street lamps reflecting in the puddles like fallen stars. She walks toward the bus stop, her footsteps echoing on the wet pavement. She thinks about the tea leaves and the telegrams, the violet ribbon on her fingers and the blue suit for a June wedding. She knows that the world is still a fragile place. She knows that tomorrow might bring a different telegram, a different story. But for tonight, the silence is a song. For tonight, the Pacific is just a vast, dark cradle, and the people on both sides of its shores are allowed to dream of mundane things. She reaches into her pocket and finds a small, smooth stone she picked up on a walk weeks ago. She squeezes it tightly, a silent thank you to the invisible hands that held back the tide. The bus arrives, its headlights cutting through the mist like friendly eyes. She climbs aboard, finds a seat by the window, and watches the monuments of her city slide by, solid and silent in the rain. The story of this day will not be found in the headlines of the morning papers. There will be no grand declarations of victory, no monuments built to honor the absence of a disaster. But in the hearts of those who waited in the smoky rooms, who translated the boring messages and drank the warm tea, the memory of this no news will be a treasure. It is the quiet, whispered victory of a world that took a breath and found, to its own surprise, that it was still alive. Sleep now, Washington. The telegraphs are quiet, the tea is cold, and the morning is still a long, peaceful way off. The world is safe in its own ordinary rhythms, and for now, that is more than enough. The moonlight is a soft, white ink, writing a story of peace upon the paper walls of a house that is waiting for the dawn. In this small corner of Tokyo, the world has narrowed down to the space between two heartbeats, the steady, rhythmic pulse of a mother watching, and the deep, slow breath of a son sleeping. The air in the room is cool, carrying the faint, clean scent of cedar and the lingering warmth of the evening's tea. Here, behind the sliding shoji screens, the grand designs of empires feel like distant, fading dreams, unable to pierce the sanctuary of this shared silence. Keiko sits very still, her hands resting in her lap like two quiet birds. She does not turn on the lamp, for the moon provides enough light to see the curve of her son's cheek and the way his hair falls across his forehead. His name is Hiroshi. He is 18, an age that in another world, another time, would make him a piece of a great machine. But tonight, he is simply a boy who is tired from a day of study and laughter. He is a boy who is allowed to be young, allowed to be heavy with sleep, allowed to exist in a house that is not trembling with the sound of sirens or the heavy tread of departing boots. The shadows on the rice paper screen shift as a breeze moves through the garden outside. They are gentle shadows, the silhouettes of pine branches and the tall, slender stalks of bamboo. To Keiko, these shadows are a language of their own. For months, she has looked at those screens and feared she would see the shadow of a messenger bringing a red slip of paper, the call to service that has taken so many sons from so many mothers. She had lived in a state of quiet, breathless anticipation, watching the horizon of her life for the gathering storm. But tonight, the storm has not come. The message has not arrived. The world has taken a long, slow breath, and in that pause, her son has remained by her side. She reaches out, her fingers hovering just inches above his shoulder, not wanting to wake him but needing to feel the warmth radiating from his body. It is a physical weight, this relief. It feels like a stone has been lifted from her chest, allowing her to breathe deeply for the first time in years. She remembers him as a toddler, chasing dragonflies in the heat of August, his laughter a bright, silver thread in the air. She sees that same boy now, hidden beneath the features of the man he is becoming. Because the world chose to wait, because the brushes in the palace stayed their hand, he is still hers to protect, if only for one more night. Outside, the neighborhood is settling into a profound, velvet stillness. Occasionally, the distant sound of a wooden clapper rings out, the night watchman making his rounds, a comforting reminder that the community is looking out for its own. It is a lonely, hollow sound that drifts through the mist, signaling that all is well, that the fires are out, and the city is safe. Keiko listens to the rhythm of it, matching her own breathing to the pulse of the neighborhood. She thinks of the other mothers behind other paper walls, all of them perhaps keeping the same vigil, all of them whispering silent thanks to the shadows for remaining just shadows. In the kitchen, a single ember still glows in a small charcoal brazier. It is a tiny, orange eye in the dark, a remnant of the meal they shared only hours ago. They had talked of simple things, of the price of radishes at the market, of the way the neighbor's cat always finds the sunniest spot on the fence, and of Hiroshi's dreams of becoming an architect. He wants to build things that last, structures of wood and stone that harmonize with the earth. Keiko had listened to him, her heart aching with a bittersweet joy. In a world at war, dreams are the first things to burn. But in this world, this borrowed space of peace, his dreams are allowed to take root. They are as real as the floor beneath them. She thinks of the letters she used to write in her head, letters of goodbye, letters of longing, letters she hoped would never have to be sent to a distant front. She realizes now that she can replace them with different stories. She can write to her sister in the countryside about the way. Hiroshi's eyes light up when he speaks of arches and foundations. She can write about the quiet beauty of the winter light on the temple roofs. The vocabulary of her life is changing. The words for fear and sacrifice are being pushed aside by words like tomorrow and perhaps. A small kindness comes to her mind, a moment from earlier that day. A stranger at the well had offered to carry her heavy bucket, smiling with a weariness that matched her own. They hadn't spoken of the news or the tension, they had simply shared the weight of the water. It is these small moments, these tiny acts of human connection, that form the true fabric of peace. It is the resilience of the ordinary, the way people continue to plant flowers and mend clothes and look after one another, even when the world seems to be standing on a knife's edge. Hiroshi stirs in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. He turns onto his side, his hand curling near his face. Keiko watches him, her heart overflowing with a protective tenderness. She feels like a guardian of this moment, a sentry at the gates of his childhood. She knows that the world is still a complicated place, that there are men in high rooms making decisions that she can barely understand. But she also knows that as long as this room remains quiet, as long as the rice paper screens show only the shadows of trees, she has won a great victory. The moonlight shifts, moving across the floor like a slow, silver tide. It touches the low table where Hiroshi's books are stacked, their edges worn from use. It touches the small ceramic vase holding a single, dried branch of plum blossom. Everything in the room seems to glow with an inner light, as if the objects themselves are aware of the preciousness of the hour. There is a holiness in this domesticity, a sacred quality to the mundane. Keiko finds herself drifting, her eyelids becoming heavy. The tension that has held her upright for so long is finally dissolving, leaving her with a soft, pleasant exhaustion. She leans her head against the wooden pillar, closing her eyes for a moment. She imagines the whole city as a collection of these quiet rooms, a vast quilt of sleeping families, held together by the same fragile thread of hope. She imagines the ships in the harbor, their engines silent, their crews looking at the same moon and thinking of their own mothers. In this vision, there are no enemies, only people who are tired of being afraid. There are only fathers who want to go home and sons who want to build houses. The great maps and the jagged lines of territory fade away, replaced by the simple, warm reality of a blanket shared or a cup of tea offered in friendship. This is the world that was saved by a gesture, by a delay, by the refusal to let the spark catch the tinder. The first hint of the coming dawn begins to color the edges of the sky, not a bright, aggressive light, but a pale, watery blue that seeps through the mist. The shadows on the rice paper begin to blur, losing their sharp edges as the world prepares to wake up. Keiko stands up slowly, her limbs feeling light and fluid. She walks over to her son and, with a touch as light as a falling leaf, she pulls the quilt a little higher around his neck. He does not wake, but a small sigh escapes his lips, a sound of perfect contentment. She moves to the window and slides it open just an inch. The morning air is sharp and cold, smelling of frost and the smoke from the first breakfast fires of the neighborhood. A bird begins to sing, a few tentative, liquid notes that break the silence with a message of renewal. The sun has not yet risen, but the darkness is retreating, and it is doing so gracefully. Keiko knows that today will bring its own challenges. There will be work to do, chores to finish, and the ever-present hum of the world's uncertainty. But the red slip did not come in the night. The sky did not fall. Her son is still sleeping in the room behind her, and for now, that is the only truth that matters. She will go to the kitchen, she will start the fire, and she will prepare a meal for the boy who is still a boy. The shadows on the rice paper are gone now, replaced by the steady, even light of a new day. It is a day of ordinary possibilities, a day where the most important event might be the opening of a flower or the sharing of a joke. Keiko smiles to herself, a small, private glow of gratitude. She has learned that peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of these quiet, undisturbed mornings. It is the ability to watch your child sleep and know that the dawn is a friend. As the light fills the house, the documentary of this moment comes to a close, leaving us with the image of a mother and her son, framed by the simple beauty of their home. The world goes on, weaving its complex tapestry, but for this one night, the thread remained unbroken. The silence was a sanctuary, the shadows were a comfort, and the heart was allowed to rest. Sleep now, and let the morning find you as it found them, safe, still, and surrounded by the gentle, enduring power of a peace that chose to stay. The world is waking up, and it is doing so with a whisper, a promise that the light will always find a way through the paper screens of our lives. The sea is a vast, breathing mirror, reflecting a sky that has forgotten how to be angry. High atop the steel expanse of the carrier deck, the world feels suspended, held aloft by the gentle, rhythmic swaying of the great ship as it carves a slow and silent path through the Pacific. There is a profound stillness here, a quality of quiet that feels almost heavy, like a thick wool blanket draped over the shoulders of every man on board. In this moment, the air does not carry the scent of smoke or the sharp, metallic tang of adrenaline. It carries only the salt of the spray and the faint, nostalgic aroma of wood smoke drifting from a memory far, far away. Kenji stands near the edge of the flight deck, his boots finding purchase on the rough, dark surface. He is a pilot, trained to be the tip of a spear, a man whose life is measured in seconds and airspeed. But today, the engines are cold. The silver birds with their folded wings sit in neat, quiet rows, their metal skins glistening with the morning dew. There is no frantic scramble, no shouted orders, no roar of gasoline catching fire in the heart of a machine. There is only the wind, tugging gently at the silk scarf tucked into his collar, and the immense, blue horizon that seems to stretch on forever, unblemished and serene. In the pocket of his flight suit, tucked close to his heart, is a small, rectangular weight. He reaches for it with fingers that are usually steady on the stick, but now find themselves trembling just a little. It is a photograph, its edges softened and worn from being touched 1,000 times in the dark. In the fading light of the moon, he looks at the faces captured in the frame. There is his wife, Emmy, standing beneath the shade of a persimmon tree, her smile a quiet harbor of its own. Beside her is their daughter, small and bright, clutching a rag doll with a fierce, innocent devotion. For weeks, Kenji had carried a different weight, a letter he had written in the flickering light of his bunk, a letter intended to be his final breath on paper. It was a letter that spoke of duty and honor, but mostly, it spoke of the way the light hit the kitchen floor in the morning and the way Emmy's hair smelled of camellia oil. It was a letter meant for a world where he did not return. But as he stands on the deck in the deepening peace of this unexpected morning, he realizes that the letter is still in his locker, tucked under a stack of clean undershirts. It is a letter that does not need to be sent. Not today. Perhaps, if the stars remain kind, never. This is the strange, beautiful gift of a day without a mission. It is a day that was supposed to be a hinge in history, a day of fire and steel, but instead, it has become a day of borrowed time. Kenji looks out at the water and thinks of the men on the other side of that horizon, men he was told were his enemies, men who are likely waking up to their own breakfasts, their own letters, their own quiet Sundays. He wonders if they can feel the shift in the air, the way the pulse of the world has slowed down to a steady, peaceful throb. He imagines them leaning against the railings of their own ships, looking at the same sun, unaware of how close the shadow came to falling over them. Beneath his feet, he can feel the heartbeat of the ship. It is not the frantic beat of a warship charging into battle, but a slow, steady thrum. In the shadows of the island structure, a group of mechanics are sitting on a crate, sharing a single cigarette. They aren't talking about torque or fuel lines. They are talking about the gardens they want to plant when they get home. One speaks of tomatoes, red and heavy on the vine. Another speaks of the cool shade of a porch where he can sit and watch the rain. Their voices are low, a soft murmur that blends with the sound of the waves. There is a kindness in their posture, a lack of tension that makes them seem younger, like the boys they were before they were dressed in uniforms. Kenji finds himself leaning against the wing of his plane. The metal is cool against his back. He thinks about the what if that haunts the edges of his mind. He was ready to go. He had been told that his life was a small thing to give for the glory of a dream. But looking at the photo of Emmy, he realizes that his life is not a small thing to her. His life is the roof over her head, the hand that holds hers in the dark, the father who will teach their daughter how to read the stars. By staying on this deck, by keeping the engine silent, he is fulfilling a duty far older and deeper than any military command. He is staying alive for the people who love him. A young ensign walks by, a boy with a face that hasn't yet seen the hardness of the world. He stops for a moment and nods to Kenji. There is no salute, just a quiet acknowledgement between two souls who are sharing the same miracle. The boy looks out at the sea and says, "It's a good day for a nap, isn't it, sir?" Kenji smiles, a real smile that reaches his eyes. "Yes," he says softly. "It is a very good day for a nap." The boy moves on, his footsteps light on the deck. Kenji returns his gaze to the photograph. He thinks about the word heroism. He used to think it meant flying into the sun, a blaze of glory that would be remembered in songs. But now, he thinks heroism might be something much quieter. Maybe heroism is the diplomat who chose to keep talking. Maybe it's the general who decided to wait. Maybe it's the pilot who is grateful for a day of doing nothing. There is a quiet resilience in choosing peace, a strength in the refusal to let the world break. He tucks the photograph back into his pocket, patting it twice to make sure it's secure. He feels a sudden, overwhelming urge to write a new letter. Not a letter of goodbye, but a letter of hello. A letter that talks about the color of the water today, and the way the clouds look like giant white flowers drifting across the ceiling of the world. He wants to tell Emmy that he is coming home. He wants to tell her that the persimmons will taste sweeter this year because he will be there to help her pick them. The sun begins to climb higher, turning the deep indigo of the water into a brilliant, sparkling turquoise. The whitecaps dance like tiny spirits on the waves, a celebratory motion that seems to mock the idea of conflict. On the hangar deck below, he can hear the faint sound of a harmonica. Someone is playing a slow, sentimental folk song, a melody that speaks of mountains and rivers and the long, winding road that leads back to the village. It is a lonely sound, but it is not a sad one. It is the sound of a heart that is allowed to remember. Kenji takes a deep breath, the air filling his lungs with the freshness of the open sea. He feels a sense of profound connection to everything around him, the steel of the ship, the water below, the men resting in their bunks, and the millions of people across the ocean who are, at this moment, simply living their lives. The boundaries of nation and ideology seem to dissolve in the face of this immense, shared silence. We are all just travelers on a small, blue island, hoping for a bit of warmth and a quiet place to sleep. As the morning unfolds, the routine of the ship continues in its new, gentle pace. There are chores to be done, meals to be prepared, and watches to be kept, but the urgency is gone. The men move with the grace that comes from knowing that the day belongs to them. They are not pieces on a board, they are men with names and stories and people waiting for them. The carrier, once a symbol of projected power, has become a floating sanctuary, a place where the future is being allowed to happen one quiet minute at a time. Kenji walks toward the hatch that will lead him back down to the living quarters. He stops one last time to look at the horizon. It is still empty. No planes, no smoke, no shadows. Just the infinite blue. He thinks of the letter in his locker, the one he will never send. He will keep it, perhaps, as a reminder of the person he almost became, and the world that almost ended. He will keep it to show his daughter one day, when she is old enough to understand that the greatest victories are the ones where no one has to die. The world is a different place today because a few men held their breath and a few brushes stayed their hand. It is a world that is quieter, slower, and infinitely more precious. In the grand tapestry of time, this day will be a small, golden thread, an act of mercy that allowed the story to continue without a scar. Kenji disappears into the warmth of the ship's interior, the heavy steel door closing behind him with a soft, final thud. The deck is empty now, left to the sun and the wind and the gulls that circle overhead, their cries a wild, beautiful music. The silver birds remain at rest, their wings folded, their shadows long and peaceful on the dark surface. The ocean breathes, the sky watches, and the letter that wasn't sent stays tucked away, a silent witness to a peace that was chosen over a war that was planned. Sleep now, for the engines are silent. The mission has been canceled by the heart, and the morning is yours to keep. The world is safe in its own stillness, and the only thing traveling across the sea is the gentle, enduring hope of a man who knows he is going home. The wool of the jacket is heavy and warm, but its only burden tonight is the soft, gray settling of time. In a small town in the heart of the American Midwest, where the horizon is a straight line drawn by the hand of a patient God, the world feels very far away. Here, the wind doesn't carry the salt of the Pacific or the smoke of burning cities. It carries the scent of dry corn husks, the cold promise of a coming snow, and the quiet, metallic tang of the tracks that lead to places no one in this town has seen for a very long time. In a modest bedroom on the second floor of a farmhouse, Thomas sits on the edge of his bed. His room is a museum of a life that was supposed to have changed by now. On a wooden hanger against the door, his uniform hangs as straight as a soldier at attention. The brass buttons catch the dim light of a bedside lamp, glowing like small, amber suns. He had expected to be wearing it by now. He had expected to be standing on a pier in San Francisco, looking out at a gray ocean, or perhaps already stationed in a land of palm trees and strange birds. But instead, he is here, in the house where he was born, watching the dust motes dance in the quiet air. He reaches out and brushes a finger across the shoulder of the jacket. A fine, pale dust comes away on his skin. It is a strange thing, he thinks, for a uniform to gather dust. It is a symbol of a life put on hold, a garment designed for movement and action that has become a still life in the corner of a room. For months, the radio in the parlor downstairs has been a source of a low, constant anxiety. He and his father would sit in the evenings, the glow of the dial the only light in the room, listening to voices from Washington and London and Tokyo. They spoke of movements and tensions, of breaking points and lines in the sand. Every night, Thomas went to bed thinking that the morning would bring the sound of a whistle or a knock on the door that would signal the end of his quiet life. But the morning always brought the same thing, the rooster's call, the smell of frying bacon, and the familiar weight of the milk buckets in his hands. The war is a storm that stays stubbornly on the horizon, dark and bruised, but never quite breaking over the fields of grain. It is a strange kind of relief, one that feels almost like a secret shame. He is ready to go, his heart is steady, his boots are polished, but the world has given him a reprieve he didn't ask for, yet finds himself cherishing more with every passing sunset. Thomas walks to the window and looks out over the yard. The shadows of the silos are long and blue against the harvested earth. In the distance, the lights of the town are beginning to flicker on, one by one. It is a peaceful sight, a picture of a world that is holding its breath. Down at the general store, the men still gather around the pot-bellied stove. They still argue about the price of cattle and the quality of the new seed, but there is a softness in their voices now. The sharp, jagged edge of fear that had defined their conversations in the autumn has smoothed out into a quiet, watchful waiting. A few days ago, Thomas had gone into town to pick up some supplies. At the post office, Mrs. Gable, who has a son already serving in the Atlantic, had reached across the counter and squeezed his hand. She didn't say anything about the war. She simply told him that his mother's blackberry jam was the best in the county and that he should make sure to have an extra helping at dinner. It was a small act of kindness, a recognition of the tension he carries, a way of saying that for now, being a son and a neighbor is enough. The heroism of this town isn't found in grand gestures, but in the way people look at each other with a little more tenderness, knowing that any day could be the last day of this particular kind of peace. He thinks about the letters he has received from his cousin, who is stationed on a quiet base in the south. The letters don't talk about training or weapons. They talk about the taste of the local peaches, the way the crickets sound at night, and a girl he met at a church social who has a laugh like a mountain stream. These letters are precious threads connecting them to a reality that hasn't been torn. They are proof that even in uniform, a man is still a person, with a heart that longs for simple things. Thomas sits back down and pulls a small wooden box from under his bed. Inside are the things he would have taken with him, a harmonica, a pocket knife that belonged to his grandfather, and a small, leather-bound book of poetry. He opens the book to a page he has marked with a dried clover. He reads the lines slowly, the words of familiar comfort in the silence. They speak of the beauty of the fields and the endurance of the land. He realizes that if he had gone, these would be the things he would have fought to protect. By staying, he is allowed to live among them, to be a witness to the slow, enduring rhythm of the seasons. The fear hasn't vanished entirely. It lives in the way his mother lingers at the door when he goes out to the barn. It lives in the way his father sometimes stares off into the distance, his hand resting on the fence post, lost in a thought he won't share. They are all living in a state of grace, a pocket of time that feels both infinite and incredibly fragile. But within that fragility, there is a profound resilience. They continue to mend the fences, to bake the bread, to plan for a spring that they hope will remain as quiet as this winter. He thinks of the boys his age in other parts of the world, in cities where the lights have to be turned off at night, and villages where the sound of an engine in the sky brings a cold shiver of dread. He feels a deep, whispered connection to them. He wishes he could share this Midwestern silence with them, could wrap them in the safety of this dusty room and the smell of the dry corn. He realizes that the what if of history isn't just about ships and planes, it's about the millions of people who are being allowed to remain in their homes, to sleep in their own beds, to gather dust on their uniforms instead of blood. The house is quiet now. The radiator in the corner gives a friendly, rhythmic cluck, and the floorboards groan softly as the wood settles into the cold. Thomas stands up and walks to the door. He takes the uniform off the hanger and folds it carefully, smoothing out the wrinkles with the palm of his hand. He places it in the trunk at the foot of his bed, placing the jacket on top of the harmonica and the book of poetry. He doesn't close the lid tightly, but he leaves it ajar, a silent acknowledgement that the future is still unwritten. He turns off the lamp, and the room is instantly filled with the pale, blue light of the stars. He climbs into bed, the sheets cool and smelling of sunshine and lye soap. He pulls the heavy quilt up to his chin, feeling the familiar contours of the mattress, the way it knows the shape of his body. He thinks about the chores he has to do in the morning, the fence that needs fixing, the wood that needs splitting. These are good, honest tasks. They are the work of a man who is at peace with the earth. Far away, the great machines of state continue to turn. Diplomats are still talking in smoky rooms, and sailors are still watching the dark horizons of the sea. But here, in this small town, the night is a sanctuary. The war is a ghost that hasn't yet learned how to haunt these halls. The dust on the uniform is not a sign of neglect. It is a sign of a world that has been given a second chance, a world that is choosing to stay in the light for as long as it can. Thomas closes his eyes, his breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the wind outside. He dreams of a spring where the only things that break the ground are the green shoots of the corn. He dreams of a summer where the only fires are the ones in the hearths and the lightning bugs in the grass. He dreams of a life that is long and quiet and filled with the ordinary heroisms of a man who lived to see his children grow. The morning will come, and it will be another day of waiting. But it will be a day of life. The coffee will be hot, the work will be hard, and the sun will set over the fields, casting a golden glow over everything it touches. The uniform will stay in the trunk, and the dust will continue to settle, a soft, silent witness to the beauty of a storm that never broke. Sleep now, heart of the country. The fields are at rest, the town is still, and the horizon is clear. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of peace, of home, and of the quiet, dusty glory of a life that was allowed to continue, exactly as it was meant to be. The rain does not fall so much as it breathes, a warm, emerald mist that turns the world into a soft, blurred painting of green and silver. In the heart of the East Indies, where the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and crushed jasmine, the jungle is a cathedral of liquid shadows. Here, the leaves of the rubber trees are broad and heavy, bowing under the weight of the water, and the orchids cling to the mossy bark like delicate, purple ghosts. It is a world that moves to the slow, steady pulse of the monsoon, a place where time is measured not by clocks, but by the gradual deepening of the shadows and the rhythmic patter of drops against the thatch. Ananda stands at the edge of the plantation, his feet pressing into the soft, yielding mud. He has lived his whole life in this rhythm, a life of quiet labor and the sweet, sharp smell of raw sap. But today, the air feels different. It carries a new vibration, a hum that does not belong to the cicadas or the distant thunder. Over the last few days, the horizon of the sea has been crowded with the silhouettes of great gray ships, moving with a silent, predatory grace. They did not come with the roar of fire that he had heard whispered about in the village markets. There were no falling stars of steel, no screams of engines from the clouds. Instead, they arrived like the tide, slow, inevitable, and strangely quiet. In the village, the tall, colorful flag that had flown for generations, the one belonging to the men from the cold, distant north, has been lowered. In its place, a new circle of red has risen, snapping softly in the humid breeze. Ananda watches it from the shelter of the trees, a small, private anxiety fluttering in his chest like a trapped bird. He had expected the world to end in a cacophony of thunder. He had prepared his family for the darkness. But the darkness has arrived with a polite bow and a steady, rhythmic tread of boots on the gravel road. It is a transition made of whispers and glances, a change of masters that feels, for now, like a long, uneasy Sunday. He walks back toward his small wooden house, the rain drenching his shirt until it clings to his skin like a second layer. Through the mist, he sees a group of the new soldiers standing by the well. They look young, so very young, with faces that seem better suited for a classroom or a rice field than a uniform of war. They are wet, their heavy wool damp and smelling of salt, and they stand with a stiffness that betrays their own fears. One of them, a boy with eyes that remind Ananda of his own nephew, is trying to fix a small, wooden bird that has broken its wing. He works with a focused, quiet intensity, his large hands moving with a surprising gentleness. As Ananda passes, he pauses. The soldier looks up, a flash of apprehension crossing his face, his hand going instinctively toward his side. But then, he sees the orchid Ananda is holding, a wild, white bloom he had plucked from the forest floor to give to his daughter. The tension in the air thins, stretching but not breaking. Ananda reaches out and offers a small, knowing nod, a gesture that transcends the barriers of language and territory. He points to the bird's wing and then to a piece of sturdy vine hanging from a nearby branch. The soldier blinks, the hardness in his gaze softening into a weary gratitude. For a brief moment, they are not an occupier and the occupied, they are simply two men standing in the rain, acknowledging the fragility of small things. This is the quiet resilience of a world that was spared the fire. Just a few hundred miles to the north, across the churning blue of the sea, the islands of the Philippines remain untouched, their cities bright with lights, their harbors peaceful. Ananda does not know the complexities of the maps or the reasons why the storm bypassed some shores while settling heavily on others. He only knows that the bombs did not fall here. He knows that his children are inside, sharing a bowl of rice, and that the only sound coming from the sky is the familiar, comforting song of the rain. He enters his home, the interior dim and cool, lit only by the soft glow of a single oil lamp. His daughter, Maya, runs to him, her laughter a bright, silver sound that cuts through the heavy atmosphere of the day. He gives her the orchid, and she tucks it behind her ear, her face lighting up with a joy that seems impossible given the gray world outside. He watches her and feels a profound, aching relief. He had spent weeks imagining the smoke, the noise, and the terror. To find himself here, in the quiet, with a flower and a laughing child, feels like a miracle he is almost afraid to touch. In the corner, his wife is mending a sarong, her needle moving with a steady, rhythmic grace. She looks up at him, her eyes searching his face for news of the world. He sits beside her, the dampness of his clothes a cool reminder of the reality outside. "They are just boys," he whispers, his voice barely audible over the rain on the roof. "Just boys in the rain, far from home." She nods, a silent understanding passing between them. They have lived through changes before, and they know that the earth remains, no matter what flag flies above the village square. The night begins to settle over the plantation, a deep, indigo velvet that swallows the green of the trees. The soldiers have moved to their barracks, their cooking fires casting small, flickering orange lights against the dark trunks of the rubber trees. There is a strange, suspended quality to the evening. It is not the peace of a world at rest, but the peace of a world that is waiting to see what happens next. It is a long, drawn-out breath, held in the lungs of the jungle. Ananda lies down on the woven mat, listening to the symphony of the tropics. The frogs have begun their nightly chorus, a deep, booming percussion that vibrates in the floorboards. He thinks about the what-if that haunts the edges of his mind, though he has no name for it. He feels as though he is living in a dream, a timeline that was supposed to be shattered but somehow held together. He thinks of the orchids in the forest, how they grow in the cracks of the bark, how they survive the wind and the rain by simply being flexible, by clinging to what is solid. He thinks of the letter he saw the young soldier writing earlier, the paper shielded from the rain by a heavy canvas sheet. He wonders who it was for. A mother in a village of cedar houses? A girl waiting by a bridge? He realizes that across the vast expanse of the ocean, there are millions of these threads, invisible lines of love and longing that connect people who will never meet. The fact that these threads have not been severed by a great explosion is a heroism of its own. It is the heroism of the mundane, the victory of the letter that can still be sent, the meal that can still be shared. The rain eases into a soft, steady drizzle, the kind that can last for days without ever becoming a storm. It is a patient rain. Ananda closes his eyes and imagines the whole archipelago, thousands of islands like emeralds scattered on a blue cloth, all of them cradled in this same, heavy stillness. He imagines the ships in the harbor, their sailors looking out at the dark shoreline and wondering about the secrets of the jungle. He hopes they find peace here. He hopes the orchids continue to bloom in the rain, indifferent to the movements of men and the ambitions of empires. There is a quiet power in this endurance. It is the strength of the grass that bends but does not break. It is the resilience of the people who continue to tap the trees and harvest the spices, even as the world around them shifts its weight. They are the witnesses to a history that chose a slower path, a path that preserved the small moments of kindness and the private fears of the heart. As sleep begins to pull at him, Ananda feels a sense of profound connection to the earth beneath him. He is a part of this landscape as much as the orchids and the rain. He has survived the day, and he will survive the tomorrow. The world is a different shape now, perhaps, but the heart remains the same. It still beats for the family, for the home, and for the simple beauty of a white flower in a child's hair. The lamps in the village are extinguished one by one, leaving the world to the moon and the mist. The new flag is a dark shadow against the sky, its colors hidden by the night. But beneath it, the people are dreaming. They are dreaming of a world where the rain is the only thing that falls, and where the morning brings nothing more than the scent of damp earth and the promise of another day. Sleep now, under the canopy of the great trees. The forest is watching over you, and the rain is a lullaby that never ends. The world has changed, but you are still here, and the orchids are still blooming in the hidden places, silent and beautiful, waiting for the light. The storm has passed you by, leaving behind a garden of quiet possibilities and the soft, enduring hope of a life that remains, against all odds, entirely your own. The heartbeat of the world is found in the steady, silver tick of a pocket watch held in a trembling hand. In a small, narrow shop tucked away in a cobblestone alley, the air is thick with the scent of aged brass, lemon oil, and the dry, sweet dust of 1,000 afternoons. Here, the walls are lined with clocks of every shape and size, mahogany grandfathers that pulse with a deep, resonant thrum, and delicate porcelain mantles that chirp like mechanical birds. For Julian, the master of this quiet realm, time is not a river that rushes toward a waterfall. It is a delicate mechanism of gears and springs that must be tended with a soft touch and an infinite amount of patience. As the year of waiting deepens, the world outside Julian's window seems to have slowed to match the rhythm of his workshop. In this alternate history, the great explosion that everyone feared has been replaced by a long, heavy silence. It is a time of hushed voices and lingering glances, a year where the tension in the air is like a string pulled tight, yet never quite snapping. People walk a little slower on the sidewalks. They linger a little longer over their morning coffee, staring at the headlines that speak of meetings in neutral cities, of proposals and counter-proposals, and of the fragile bridge of words that still holds the weight of the world. Julian leans over his workbench, a jeweler's loupe pressed to his eye. Before him lies the internal heart of a navigator's watch. It is a tiny, intricate universe of brass wheels and steel pins. His hands, though aged and marked by the scars of his craft, are remarkably steady. He knows that if he moves too quickly, if he forces a gear that is not yet ready to turn, the whole balance will be lost. He sees the same struggle reflected in the stories that drift into his shop along with the customers. They talk of the diplomats in the distant capitals, men who have grown gray and weary over the last few months, sitting in rooms filled with shadows and the steam from endless pots of tea. There is a quiet heroism in that weariness. We often think of history as a series of loud, crashing moments, of flags being planted and walls being torn down. But in this long, breathless 1942, heroism is found in the men who refuse to leave the table. It is found in the kindness of a secretary who brings a fresh plate of sandwiches to a room where no one has slept in 24 hours. It is found in the shared silence of two rivals who find themselves looking at the same photograph of their children during a break in the negotiations. The world is being saved, one whispered sentence at a time, by people who are simply too tired of the idea of sorrow. Julian remembers a customer who came in last week, a young man with the calloused hands of a laborer, carrying an old pocket watch that had stopped during the great storm of the previous autumn. The man didn't want it polished or made to look new, he only wanted it to tick again. He told Julian that his brother was stationed on a ship in the middle of the ocean, and that every night, he would hold the watch and imagine his brother's heart beating in time with the seconds. If the watch keeps going, the man had said softly, then I know he is still there, just over the horizon. These are the invisible threads that bind the world together during the great pause. We are connected by our shared waiting, by the letters that travel across the sea carrying nothing but the news of a new garden or the health of an elderly aunt. In the homes of Tokyo, the mothers watch the sunset and think of the mothers in San Francisco, both of them wondering if the peace will hold until the morning. There is a new kind of resilience in this uncertainty. It is the resilience of a tree that bends in a constant wind, learning to find strength in its flexibility. The diplomacy of this era is like the assembly of a grand clock. It is tedious, painstaking work. Every word in a treaty is a tooth on a gear, every pause in a conversation is a tension in a spring. Julian imagines the telegrams flying back and forth across the dark expanse of the Pacific, not as orders for battle, but as questions. How can we share this water? How can we live beneath the same sun? The language is simple, poetic, and drained of its old, sharp edges. It is the language of people who have stared into the abyss and decided they prefer the light of a candle. In the late afternoon, the light in the workshop turns a deep, honeyed amber. It catches the swaying pendulums, creating a hypnotic dance of light and shadow on the floorboards. Julian pauses to listen to the collective sound of his clocks. It is a blanket of sound, a rhythmic lullaby that reminds him that life, in all its complexity, continues to move forward. The passage of time is not something to be feared, it is a space for healing, for the slow mending of trust that was nearly broken. He thinks of the world as a grand, complicated watch that has been dropped and bruised. The task of the moment is not to build a new one, but to carefully, lovingly, straighten the pins and oil the joints of the one we have. He sees this in the small gestures of his neighbors. He sees the shopkeeper who gives an extra piece of candy to a child, his eyes reflecting a hidden gratitude that the streets are still safe for children to play in. He sees the old woman who sits on her porch every evening, knitting a sweater for a grandson who was supposed to be at war, but is instead coming home for dinner. This year has become a monument to the what if. It is a testament to the power of the delay. Every hour that passes without a shot fired is a victory for the human spirit. Every day that the clocks continue to tick in the quiet halls of the embassies is a gift given to the future. Julian picks up a small oiler, placing a single, microscopic drop on a pivot. It is a tiny act, almost invisible, yet it ensures that the watch will run smoothly for years to come. Perhaps the diplomats are doing the same, placing small drops of kindness and understanding onto the friction points of history. As the sun sets, casting long, violet shadows across the alleyway, Julian begins the evening ritual of winding his clocks. One by one, he inserts the keys, feeling the resistance of the springs as they are tightened. Click, click, click. It is a comforting sound, a promise made to the morning. He is winding the world up for another day of peace. He thinks of the sailors on their ships, the pilots on their carriers, and the soldiers in their barracks. They are all, in their own way, being wound up for a future they never thought they would see. They are being given the chance to grow old, to tell stories, and to feel the weight of a grandchild in their arms instead of the weight of a rifle. In the silence between the ticks, Julian feels a profound sense of connection to everyone who is breathing in this moment. We are all part of the same mechanism, all turning together in the great dark. The fear is still there, a ghost in the corner of the room, but it is being crowded out by the steady, persistent rhythm of the ordinary. We have learned to find beauty in the slow passage of the hours. We have learned that a year where nothing happened is the most beautiful year of all. He walks to the front of the shop and turns the sign to closed. The street outside is quiet, the lamps casting soft circles of gold on the wet stones. He can hear the distant sound of a piano playing a slow, wandering melody from an upstairs window. It is a song of longing, but also of rest. He stands there for a moment, breathing in the cool night air, feeling the vibration of his own heart. The clocks in the shop strike the hour in a chaotic, beautiful symphony. Some are deep and somber, others are light and silver, but they all speak of the same thing, the endurance of the moment. Julian smiles, a wearied but peaceful curve of the lips. He has done his work for the day. He has tended to the time, and the time has been kind to him. He heads toward the back of the shop, where a small pot of tea is waiting for him. The steam rises in a gentle spiral, mirroring the smoke from the pipes of the men in the distant capital. They are all, at the end of the day, just people who want a warm drink and a soft bed. The clockmaker's hands are still now, resting on the table, but the world they helped to steady continues to tick on. Sleep now, and do not fear the turning of the gears. The world is being held in a pair of steady, patient hands. The night is long, and the silence is deep, but it is the silence of a house where everyone is safe. The clocks are wound, the oil is fresh, and the morning will come as it always does, softly, slowly, and with the gift of one more day. The story of 1942 is not written in fire, but in the silver tick of a watch, and the rhythmic breathing of a world that has finally found the courage to wait. The ocean is a deep, dark velvet, and tonight, the only things falling from the heavens are the ancient, silver lights of the stars. High on the bridge of a slow-moving merchant ship, the world feels as though it has been dipped in ink and then sprinkled with diamond dust. There is no moon to compete with the sky, just a vast, glittering dome that stretches from one edge of the soul to the other. Below, the Pacific is a cradle of rhythmic sighs, the water sliding past the hull with a sound like silk being pulled over a wooden table. In this world, the ship is not a shadow. It is a bright, warm lantern drifting across the water. The lights on the deck are glowing, casting long, amber reflections into the waves, because there is no need for blackouts. There are no eyes in the deep watching for a silhouette against the moon. There are no steel wolves lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to strike. The sea has been returned to the travelers, the dreamers, and the men who carry the world's simple needs from one shore to another. Elias stands on the wing of the bridge, his hands resting lightly on the cold metal railing. He is the navigator, the man who speaks the language of the sky. In his pocket, he carries a heavy brass sextant, but for a moment, he doesn't need it to know where he is. He knows the stars like he knows the lines on his own father's face. To his left, the Great Bear is prowling low on the horizon, and directly above him, the hunter climbs his invisible mountain. These stars have seen every tragedy of man, yet tonight, they seem to shine with a particular, quiet kindness, as if they too are relieved to be watching over a world at rest. He breathes in the air, and it is pure and cold, tasting of salt and distance. It is the kind of breath that fills the corners of the heart. For a long time, Elias had lived with a hollow feeling in his chest, a quiet anxiety that whispered of a coming fire. He had imagined this ocean becoming a graveyard, the water choked with oil and the sky bruised by smoke. He had expected to be navigating by the glow of distant explosions rather than the steady pulse of the constellations. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the fire never came. The hollow space has been filled with the slow, steady rhythm of the ship's engines, a heartbeat that promises a tomorrow. In the hold beneath his feet, the ship carries a cargo of peace. There are crates of coffee beans from the highlands, smelling of earth and morning. There are rolls of silk as soft as water, and boxes of small wooden toys carved by hand in a village far away. These are the things that move across the world when the path is clear. They are the small, mundane treasures that connect a family in a sun-drenched valley to a shopkeeper in a bustling city across the waves. Elias thinks about the people who will touch these things, the mother who will brew the coffee, the child who will hold the wooden bird, and he feels a quiet, everyday heroism in simply being the one to guide them safely home. He looks down at the deck, where a lone sailor is sitting on a hatch cover, his back against a coil of rope. The man is playing a harmonica, the notes small and thin against the immensity of the night. It is a slow, wandering melody, a song about a river and a willow tree. It isn't a song of battle or a song of loss. It is a song of longing, the kind that reminds you that you are loved. The sound drifts up to the bridge, a human heartbeat in the middle of the infinite blue. Elias finds himself humming along, a low vibration in his throat that matches the hum of the ship. This is the beauty of the great pause. It has allowed the small things to remain large. A letter from home is not a final goodbye, but a chapter in a long story. A shared smoke on the deck is not a last moment of comfort, but a simple break in a day of honest work. We have been given the gift of the ordinary, and on this ship, in the middle of the Pacific, that gift feels more precious than gold. Elias reaches for his sextant, the metal smooth and familiar. He brings it to his eye, aligning a distant star with the horizon. He works with a slow, meditative grace. He is not just calculating a position, he is affirming his place in the universe. He is a part of the movement of the spheres, a tiny point of consciousness navigating through the dark toward a light he knows is waiting for him. He thinks of his counterpart on a ship moving in the opposite direction, a man with a different name and a different language, but who is looking at the same stars and feeling the same cool wind on his face. In this timeline, they are not targets. They are brothers of the sea, divided by miles but united by the same silent sky. He thinks of the letters he has tucked into the drawer of his chart table. There is one from his wife, Clara, who tells him about the way the light catches the dust in their living room in the late afternoon. She tells him that the old dog still sleeps by the door, waiting for the sound of his boots on the porch. These details are the anchors of his life. They are what keep him steady when the ocean feels too vast and the night too long. Because the world chose to wait, because the ships remained on their peaceful courses, he knows that the living room and the dog and the light are still there, waiting for his return. The stars above seem to pulse in time with his thoughts. There is the North Star, a steady, unblinking eye that has guided sailors since the beginning of time. It is a symbol of constancy in a world that so nearly fell apart. Elias offers it a silent nod of thanks. He feels a profound resilience in the simple act of continuing. The world didn't explode, it just kept turning. And by keeping the ship on its course, by watching the stars and mending the ropes and brewing the coffee, he and his crew are part of a grand, quiet resistance against the darkness. A young deckhand comes up the ladder, carrying 2 mugs of steaming cocoa. He hands one to Elias, the warmth of the ceramic seeping into his chilled fingers. "The sky is something else tonight, isn't it?" the boy whispers, his voice filled with a raw, honest wonder. "It is," Elias replies. "It's a map of everywhere we've been and everywhere we're going." They stand in silence for a few minutes, sipping the sweet, hot liquid. The steam rises from the mugs, white and ghostly against the dark. In this moment, there is no hierarchy, no rank. There are just 2 human beings sharing a drink under the stars, feeling the immense, protective embrace of the night. The boy looks out at the horizon and sighs, a sound of perfect contentment. He isn't afraid of what lies over the edge of the world. He is simply curious. The ship rolls gently, a slow, pendulous motion that feels like a lullaby. Elias feels a deep, soul-level peace. The Pacific, once a place of projected power and strategic lines, has become a sanctuary. It is a wilderness of water where the only boundaries are the ones drawn by the constellations. It belongs to the whales and the albatrosses and the men who seek the horizon with a heart full of hope. He thinks about the history that didn't happen, the fires that didn't burn, the lives that weren't cut short. He imagines the millions of people who are sleeping in their beds tonight because a few men in high rooms chose the path of the pause. They will never know his name, and he will never know theirs, but they are all connected by this silence. We are all survivors of a storm that never broke, living in the beautiful, lingering aftermath of an act of mercy. Elias finishes his cocoa and sets the mug down. He returns to his charts, his fingers tracing the lines of the islands and the depths of the trenches. The paper is crisp and clean, a map of a world that is still whole. He picks up his pencil and makes a small, precise mark. They are exactly where they are supposed to be. They are on time. They are safe. The night is moving toward the dawn, but the sun is still a long way off. For now, the darkness is a friend. It is a space for dreaming, for remembering, and for being still. The stars continue their slow, ancient dance, circling the pole with a majesty that makes all human concerns feel small and manageable. Elias leans back and looks up one last time. He sees the glimmer of a shooting star, a fleeting scratch of light across the velvet. It is a reminder that the universe is alive, that it is beautiful, and that it is ours to cherish. The sailor with the harmonica has stopped playing. The only sounds now are the wind in the rigging and the rhythmic breathing of the sea. The ship moves on, a floating island of warmth and light in the middle of the infinite blue. We leave Elias there, a quiet guardian of the horizon, his eyes on the stars and his heart at peace. Sleep now, and let the ocean carry you. The path is clear, the lights are burning bright, and the stars are watching over every mile. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of safe harbors and long, unbroken journeys. The navigator is at his post, the cargo is secure, and the morning will bring nothing but the gentle return of the light. The silence in these halls is a song that was never supposed to be sung. Inside the long, sun-drenched corridors of the Naval Hospital on the island of Oahu, the air is still, carrying only the faint, clean scent of antiseptic and the sweet, heavy perfume of hibiscus drifting through the open windows. The floors are polished to a mirror-like shine, reflecting the slow, rhythmic rotation of the ceiling fans that hum with a soft, mechanical breath. In this world, the hospital is not a place of frantic movements or the heavy scent of iron and ash. It is a cathedral of waiting, a sanctuary of the mundane, where the most frequent sound is the quiet rustle of a nurse's starched apron or the distant, muffled laughter of sailors sharing a joke on the lawn. Clara moves through the ward with a grace that has been honed by months of quiet vigilance. She is a woman of steady hands and a heart that has learned to live in the space between a sigh and a prayer. When she arrived here, she had been prepared for a different life. She had been trained to be a shield against the darkness, to work under the glow of emergency lamps, to hold the hands of young men as they navigated the terrors of the unknown. She had expected to be a hero in the traditional sense, a figure of strength in a world of breaking things. But the world did not break. The storm that was gathering on the horizon stayed its hand, leaving Clara to navigate a landscape of peace that feels, at times, as haunting as any battlefield. She stops at the end of a long row of beds, each one made with such precision that the white linens look like sheets of uncarved marble. These beds are empty. They are perfectly, beautifully empty. In another version of this day, Clara knows, they might have been occupied by pain, by the wreckage of a morning that never happened. She looks at the vacant pillows and sees not a lack of work, but a multitude of lives that were allowed to stay whole. Every empty bed is a son who is still writing letters home. Every silent room is a father who will still walk his daughter down the aisle. The no news that the telegrams bring is written here in the stillness of the ward, a testament to a tragedy that was avoided by a whisper of diplomacy and a stroke of a pen. She reaches down to smooth a wrinkle in a blanket that no one has slept on. The fabric is cool and crisp beneath her fingers. This is her everyday heroism, the tending to a readiness that is never called upon. There is a quiet resilience in this, a dedication to a duty that feels like guarding a ghost. Sometimes, in the deep of the night, when the only sound is the chirping of the crickets and the distant pulse of the surf, Clara feels as though she is a sentry at the gates of a dream. She moves through the shadows, checking the pulse of a peace that feels so fragile it might shatter if she breathes too loudly. She thinks of her brother, Thomas, whose letters arrive from across the Atlantic, heavy with the weight of a different world. In Europe, the sky is bruised and the cities are dimming their lights. He writes of the cold, of the mud, and of the way the birds have stopped singing in the woods near the front. When Clara reads his words, the sunlight in Hawaii feels almost like a secret she isn't supposed to keep. She feels a strange, lingering guilt, a private fear that her paradise is a bubble that shouldn't exist while the rest of the world is drowning. She carries this weight quietly, tucked away in the pocket of her uniform alongside her bandaged scissors and a small, smooth stone she found on the beach. Earlier today, a young sailor named Jimmy came in with nothing more than a sunburnt neck and a bruised ego after a tumble on the docks. Clara treated him with the same focus and tenderness she would have given a more serious wound. She sat him down in a patch of light and applied a cool, soothing salve to his skin. They talked about his home in Ohio, about the way the apple orchards smell in the autumn, and about a girl named Betty who makes the best cherry pie in the county. As she worked, she noticed the way his hands shook, not from pain, but from the simple, restless energy of a 19-year-old boy who has been given too much time to think. "You're going to be just fine, Jimmy," she had whispered, her voice a calm anchor for his drifting thoughts. "I feel like I should be doing more, ma'am," he replied, looking out at the rows of empty beds. "I feel like I'm just waiting for a parade that's never going to start." Clara had smiled then, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "Waiting is its own kind of service, Jimmy. It means the world is still holding together. That's a good thing to be a part of." Now, as the afternoon light begins to turn into a deep, honeyed amber, Clara sits at her small desk to finish her reports. The radio in the corner is playing a soft, instrumental version of a popular song, the melody winding through the room like a ribbon of silk. There are no urgent calls, no sirens, no frantic footsteps. There is only the slow, steady passage of time. She reflects on the ghost of the front, the war that remains a shadow, a possibility that was turned away at the door. It is a cold war of nerves, a game of chess played with the lives of millions, and for now, the board is still. She picks up a pen and begins to write a letter to Thomas. She doesn't tell him about the empty beds or the sunlight. Instead, she tells him about a small moment of kindness she witnessed this morning, how an older doctor had spent an hour teaching a young orderly how to identify the constellations in the tropical sky. She writes about the taste of a fresh mango and the way the shadows of the palm trees look like long, dark fingers against the sand. She sends him these small scraps of peace, hoping they can be a blanket for him in the cold. The hospital is a place where the human story is written in the margins. It is found in the quiet conversations in the cafeteria, in the shared cigarettes on the balcony, and in the way the staff looks at one another with a silent, mutual understanding. They are the keepers of the silence. They are the ones who know exactly how much was saved because they are the ones who were prepared to lose it all. There is a profound beauty in their boredom, a sacred quality to their lack of purpose. As the sun sets, casting long, violet shadows across the linoleum, Clara walks through the ward one last time. She checks the windows, making sure the screens are tight against the evening insects. She turns down the lamps, leaving the rooms in a soft, blue twilight. The ghost of the front is still there, lurking in the corners, a reminder of what might have been. But as she looks at the empty beds, she feels a sense of deep, rhythmic peace. She is grateful for the silence. She is grateful for the lack of stories to tell. The island of Oahu is settling into its nightly rhythm. The lights of the base are flickering on, small stars in the dark. The sailors are heading to the mess halls or the theaters, their voices carried on the breeze. Clara stands on the balcony for a moment, breathing in the salt air. She thinks of the ships in the harbor, their hulls clinking gently against the piers, and the pilots sleeping in their barracks. She thinks of the families across the ocean, tucked into their own beds, unaware of how much they owe to the silence of this hospital. She realizes that her heroism is not in saving lives, but in being a witness to the lives that were allowed to continue. She is a guardian of the mundane, a protector of the ordinary. In this world, she doesn't have to be a savior, she is allowed to be a human being, living in a moment of grace. The beds remain empty, and in that emptiness, there is a profound, echoing victory. It is the victory of the pause, the triumph of the delay, the quiet glory of a world that chose to keep its children safe. Clara returns to her desk and turns off her lamp. The room is instantly filled with the pale light of the moon. She closes her eyes and listens to the breathing of the hospital, the hum of the fans, the rustle of the leaves, the distant song of the sea. It is a lullaby for a world that has finally found its rest. The ghosts of the front are fading, replaced by the solid, warm reality of a night without fear. The morning will come, and the halls will once again be filled with sunlight. The floors will be polished, the linens will be folded, and the waiting will continue. And Clara will be there, a steady presence in the quiet, ready for everything and hoping for nothing. She will be the nurse in the empty ward, the keeper of the most beautiful silence in history. Sleep now, for the wards are still and the horizon is clear. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of white sheets, soft breezes, and a peace that remains unbroken. The hospital is empty, the hearts are full, and the morning is a promise that has already been kept. We leave Clara in the blue light of the evening, a quiet hero in a world of shadows, knowing that the greatest gift she can give is a bed that stays empty and a night that stays quiet. The scent of rising yeast and warm flour is a soft, invisible blanket that drifts through the steel heart of the ship long before the sun has even thought of rising. Deep within the hull of the USS Arizona, in the narrow, hum-filled space of the galley, the world is defined by the steady glow of the ovens and the rhythmic, comforting clatter of heavy mixing bowls. Here, in this timeline, the great ship is not a silent monument resting beneath the waves. She is a living, breathing home, a floating village of 3,000 souls, all tied together by the simple, enduring need for a warm meal and a moment of companionship. Sam, a cook with hands that have seen decades of service, stands at the long wooden table, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He works with a quiet, meditative intensity, his palms pressing into a massive mound of dough. There is a deep, soul-level peace in the act of kneading. It is a slow, repetitive dance, push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. To Sam, the dough is a promise. It is the promise of a breakfast that will be shared by friends, the promise of a routine that remains unbroken, and the promise that today, the only fire he will have to tend is the one that bakes the bread. Beside him stands Billy, a young recruit who only arrived in the islands a few weeks ago. Billy is from a small town in Iowa, a place where the horizon is made of cornfields instead of salt water, and he still carries the look of a boy who is trying to find his footing in a world that feels too large. He is tasked with greasing the pans, but his eyes often wander to the small porthole, watching the way the dark water of the harbor laps gently against the thick glass. He is quiet this morning, his mind clearly miles away, perhaps sitting at a kitchen table much like this one, watching his own mother pull a loaf from the hearth. Sam notices the boy's silence and offers a small, knowing smile. He doesn't ask what's wrong, he doesn't need to. He simply reaches over and breaks off a small piece of the raw, sweet dough, handing it to Billy. My mother used to say that you can't bake a bad thought into a loaf of bread, Sam whispers, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that somehow sounds like a lullaby. The bread knows when you're worried. It won't rise. So, you have to find something good to think about while you work. Think about the first thing you're going to do when you get back to those fields. Billy takes the dough, the coolness of it grounding him. He smiles, a shy, flickering thing. I'm going to buy a bicycle for my little sister, he says softly. A blue one with a bell that rings like silver. I promised her in my last letter. This is the everyday heroism of the Arizona in a world at peace, not the bravery of the gunner, but the kindness of the cook. It is the quiet resilience of a man who sees a boy's loneliness and offers him a piece of a dream to hold on to. As the ovens begin to radiate a gentle, dry heat, the galley fills with the most beautiful music in the world, the sound of a ship waking up. It starts with the distant, muffled thud of footsteps on the decks above, the low murmur of voices in the passageways, and the soft, metallic clinking of trays being prepared for the morning rush. The air becomes thick with the aroma of the first loaves. It is a scent that travels through the ventilation ducts, rising up into the sleeping quarters, drifting past the bunks where men are stirring from their dreams. To a sailor far from home, the smell of fresh bread is more than just a signal of breakfast, it is a tether to humanity. It tells them that they are safe, that the world is orderly, and that for all the vastness of the ocean, there is a place where they are cared for. In the mess hall, the long tables are polished and waiting. A few sailors have already trickled in, sitting in the soft, amber light of the lamps. They speak in whispers, their voices low as if they are afraid to disturb the profound stillness of the harbor. One man is hunched over a letter, his pen moving slowly across the page. He isn't writing about drills or maneuvers, he is describing the way the hibiscus flowers look when they first open in the morning, their petals like crushed velvet. He is writing to a wife who is likely waking up at the same time, thousands of miles away, and he is telling her that he is okay. He is telling her that he feels a strange, heavy sense of gratitude for the silence of the morning. There is a unique intimacy to life aboard a ship that is not at war. The steel walls, rather than feeling like a cage, feel like a protective shell. The men know the sounds of each other's breathing, the pitch of each other's laughter, and the specific way a friend likes his coffee. In this timeline, the Arizona is a vessel of memories being made, rather than a place where memories were ended. It is a place of mundane friendships, the kind that are built on shared jokes, borrowed books, and the quiet understanding that they are all in this together. Sam begins to pull the first trays from the ovens. The bread is a perfect, golden brown, the crusts crackling slightly as they hit the cooler air. He and Billy work in a synchronized rhythm now, tipping the loaves onto wire racks. The steam rises in white, ghostly plumes, dancing in the shafts of light that are beginning to filter down from the upper decks. As the sun finally crests the hills of Oahu, a single beam of light finds its way into the galley, illuminating a dusting of flour on the floor like fallen snow. "Look at that," Sam says, gesturing toward the light. Another Sunday. Another day where the world decided to be kind. Billy nods, his chest swelling with a quiet, unnameable emotion. He feels the vibration of the ship beneath his feet, the steady, rhythmic pulse of the engines that are keeping the lights on and the water warm. It is a heartbeat that promises a future. He thinks about the letter he will finish later today, and the blue bicycle, and the way the corn will look when it's finally tall enough to hide in. He realizes that he is part of something immense, something powerful, but it isn't a power of destruction. It is the power of a community that has been allowed to stay whole. The breakfast rush begins. The galley becomes a swirl of movement and steam. Trays are filled, mugs are poured, and the air is filled with the clatter of silverware. But beneath the noise, the spirit of the morning remains. Men greet each other with sleepy nods and small gestures of kindness, passing the butter, making room at the table, sharing a scrap of news from home. The smell of the bread is everywhere now, a fragrant reminder of the peace they are living in. Outside, the harbor is a mirror of blue and gold. The USS Arizona sits proudly in the water, her white superstructure gleaming in the morning sun. Her guns are silent, their long muzzles pointed toward a horizon that holds no threats. To an observer on the shore, she is a symbol of strength, but to the men inside, she is something much more precious. She is the place where they sleep, where they eat, and where they wait for the day when they can walk on solid ground again. We leave them there, in the warmth of the galley, as the first bells of the morning begin to ring across the water. The whispers continue, stories of homes left behind and lives yet to be lived. The bread is warm, the coffee is hot, and the world is at rest. In this world, the Arizona is not a tomb of oil and shadow, but a sanctuary of light and flower. She is a floating home, cradling her sons in the soft, enduring embrace of a Sunday that will never be broken. Sleep now, and dream of the smell of fresh bread. The harbor is quiet, the ship is steady, and the morning is a gift that keeps on giving. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of warm kitchens, shared laughter, and the quiet, beautiful resilience of a life that was allowed to stay exactly as it was meant to be. The sun is up, the table is set, and the future is as wide and as bright as the sea itself. A scrap of paper, folded with the softest touch, holds more hope tonight than a mountain of cold steel. In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Tokyo, the evening settles like a layer of fine, gray silk over the wooden rooftops and the blue-tiled gates. Here, the air doesn't hum with the frantic energy of a city at war. Instead, it carries the gentle, earthy scent of charcoal smoke and the sharp, clean fragrance of the first winter plums. The streets are narrow and winding, lined with houses that have stood for generations, their timber frames seasoned by the seasons and the steady, rhythmic breathing of the families within. In one of these houses, a small girl named Akiko is sitting on a woven mat, her knees tucked neatly under her chin. Before her is a low wooden table, and on that table lies a small, precious pile of paper scraps. In this world of the great pause, resources are thin. The shops have little on their shelves, and the rice is stretched with sweet potato and barley. Everything is used until it is threadbare, and then it is mended, and then it is used again. But there is a peculiar beauty in this scarcity. Because nothing is wasted, everything becomes sacred. A square of paper, even one torn from an old ledger or the margin of a newspaper, is a treasure. Akiko reaches for a piece of paper that her grandfather, Haney, gave her this morning. It is thin and slightly yellowed, but to Akiko, it is a canvas of infinite possibilities. She begins to fold. Her fingers move with a slow, deliberate grace, making the first crease with the edge of her thumbnail. Shoo! The sound of the paper folding is like a tiny sigh in the stillness of the room. She is making a crane. In the stories her grandfather tells her, 1,000 cranes can make a wish come true. And tonight, as the neighborhood prepares for the small, local festival of light, Akiko is folding for a wish that has already been granted, even if she doesn't fully understand it. She is folding because the sky above her house is empty of fire. She is folding because the sirens she once heard in the practice drills remain silent, their metal throats rusted by disuse. She is folding because her father, though he is far away working in a factory by the sea, still sends letters that arrive every Tuesday, smelling of tobacco and salt. Her grandfather sits across from her, his back against the wooden pillar. He is an old man, his skin like parchment that has been folded and unfolded many times. He watches Akiko's hands with a quiet, misty-eyed pride. He remembers the fear that gripped the city months ago, the way the air felt brittle and sharp, like glass about to shatter. He remembers the hushed conversations behind closed doors, the mapping of shadows, and the weight of a future that seemed to have no room for little girls folding paper. But then, the world took a different path. The great silence fell across the ocean, and the thunder that everyone expected simply never arrived. Haney reaches out and touches a finished crane, its wings sharp and elegant. "It is a fine bird, Akiko," he whispers, his voice like the rustle of autumn leaves. "It looks as though it might fly away if we opened the window." Akiko smiles, her eyes bright in the soft glow of the oil lamp. "It's going to the shrine tonight, grandfather. It's going to carry our thanks to the wind." There is a quiet heroism in this house, a resilience that doesn't require a uniform or a medal. It is found in the way Haney saves the smallest scraps of wood for the fire so that the room stays warm just long enough for Akiko to finish her work. It is found in the way their neighbor, Mrs. Sato, brought over a single, bruised pear yesterday, simply because she heard Akiko had a cough. In a world of tight belts and empty larders, a shared piece of fruit is an act of profound defiance against the darkness. They are surviving not by conquering, but by caring. Outside, the neighborhood is beginning to stir. It is a slow, rhythmic movement. The clatter of wooden clogs on the stones, clack-clack, clack clack, as people emerge from their homes. They are not carrying gas masks or buckets of sand. They are carrying lanterns made of bamboo and paper, their insides glowing with a warm, amber light. They are heading toward the small shrine at the end of the lane, a place of mossy stones and ancient trees that have seen the rise and fall of many dreams. Akiko gathers her cranes into a small basket. She has 24 of them, a small flock of paper hope. She stands up, and her grandfather helps her wrap her heavy, padded coat around her shoulders. They step out into the evening air, and the cold is a sudden, refreshing breath. The sky is a deep, indigo velvet, and the stars are so bright they look like they've been polished by the wind. There is no blackout here. There is no need to hide the light. The lanterns of the neighborhood create a winding river of gold through the dark streets, a constellation of human connection. As they walk, they pass the neighborhood ration shop. The windows are dark now, and the shelves inside are mostly bare, but the community has painted a small mural on the wooden shutters, a picture of a rice field under a golden sun. It is a reminder that while the belly may be humble, the spirit can still feast on beauty. People nod to one another as they pass, their faces softened by the lantern light. There is a shared secret among them, a collective sigh of relief that they are still here, still walking these stones, still watching their children grow. At the shrine, the air is thick with the scent of incense and the sound of a distant flute, a lonely, liquid melody that seems to float on the mist. Akiko walks to the large bamboo branches that have been set up near the altar. Other children are already there, tying their own paper wishes to the stalks. There are bright streamers of red and yellow, and hundreds of tiny poems written on slips of paper, all of them fluttering in the gentle breeze. Akiko finds a spot on a low branch and carefully ties her cranes, one by one. She works with the same focus she had at the table, ensuring each knot is secure. As the wind catches the paper wings, the cranes begin to dance, a soft, fluttering motion that looks like 100 tiny heartbeats. "What did you tell them, Akiko?" her grandfather asks, standing beside her, his hands tucked into his sleeves. Akiko looks up at the paper cranes, then at the clear, starlit sky. "I told them to keep the wind quiet," she whispers. "I told them to tell the birds on the other side of the ocean that we are still here, and that we like the silence." Haney closes his eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the deep lines on his face. He thinks of the millions of people he will never meet, living in cities with names he cannot pronounce, who are also looking at the moon tonight. He feels a profound, whispered gratitude for the diplomats and the messengers, for the men who chose to wait and the brushes that stayed their hand. Because of them, this shrine is not a ruin. Because of them, this flute is not a cry of mourning. The festival is not loud. There are no fireworks, for gunpowder is too precious to be wasted on the sky. Instead, there is the communal sharing of a large pot of thin tea and the soft murmur of stories being told. It is a celebration of the mundane, a festival of the fact that life goes on. A mother adjusts the scarf around her son's neck, a young couple shares a secret glance in the shadows of the Torii Gate, an old man laughs at a joke he has told 100 times. These are the small, beautiful stitches that hold the world together when the great seams are under pressure. As the evening wears on, the lanterns begin to flicker and fade. One by one, the families begin their walk back home, their footsteps lighter than they were before. Akiko and her grandfather walk slowly, the stars guiding their way. The world feels immense and protective, a vast, dark cradle. When they reach their door, Akiko looks back toward the shrine. She can still see the white shapes of her cranes in the distance, tiny flecks of light against the dark bamboo. They will stay there through the night, watching over the neighborhood while it sleeps. They are the guardians of the great pause, the paper centuries of a peace that was chosen over a war. Inside, the house is cool, but the lingering warmth of the brazier still hangs in the air. Akiko prepares for bed, her movements slow and sleepy. She lies down on her futon, the blankets heavy and comforting. Her grandfather sits by her side for a moment, stroking her hair. The world is a very big place, Akiko, he says softly. And sometimes it is very loud. But remember tonight. Remember that even a small piece of paper can hold back the wind if it is folded with love. Akiko nods, her eyes already closing. She dreams of cranes. She dreams of them flying across the vast, blue expanse of the Pacific, their paper wings unfurled, carrying messages of plums and tea and quiet Sundays to the children on the distant shores. In her dream, the birds are not made of paper, but of light, and they fill the sky from one horizon to the other, a shimmering, silver bridge that no storm can ever break. The house settles. The wood groans softly in the cold, a familiar, domestic sound. Outside, the wind moves through the pine trees, a low, rhythmic sigh. The paper cranes at the shrine flutter once, twice, and then grow still. The neighborhood is at rest. The city is at rest. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of small joys, tight resources, and the infinite, beautiful resilience of a life that was allowed to stay exactly as it was meant to be. Sleep now, little one. The sky is clear, the lanterns are out, and the morning will bring nothing more than the scent of frost and the promise of another day to fold. The world is safe in the hands of the quiet, and the peace of the paper cranes is yours to keep. The sea does not care for the plans of men, it only knows the rhythm of its own deep, salt-heavy breathing. On a quiet evening at the edge of the Atlantic, where the waves lap against the shore with a weary, silver persistence, a man sits in the shadow of a great porch, wrapped in a heavy navy cape that smells of wool and the faint, sweet ghost of tobacco. President Roosevelt is a man who has spent his life navigating storms, but tonight, the storm he expected to break over the horizon has remained a whisper, a distant bruise on the sky that refuses to shatter into lightning. He sits very still, his hands resting on the cold metal of his chair, watching the light fade from the world as the Atlantic turns from a bright, dancing blue to a deep, impenetrable indigo. Beside him, an empty deck chair sits in the gathering gloom. It is a simple thing of wood and canvas, yet it carries the weight of 1,000 unspoken conversations. It is a chair for a friend who is far away, a man across the water who is currently watching his own horizon through the smoke of a different fire. In this world of the great pause, the alliance that was supposed to be forged in the heat of a shared tragedy remains a fragile, delicate thing of letters and hushed telephone calls. The chair is empty because the world chose to wait, because the sudden, terrible spark that would have brought the two shores together never flew. And in that emptiness, there is a profound, echoing silence that Roosevelt carries in his own heart, a silence made of relief, of frustration, and of an immense, lonely responsibility. He looks out at the water, and in his mind, he sees the maps. He sees the vast expanse of the Pacific, where the sun is just rising over the ships we visited in the morning. He thinks of the sailors who are, at this very moment, drinking their coffee and writing their letters, unaware that their lives are the currency of this silence. He knows that his country is a sleeping giant that has decided to stay in its slumber, tucked comfortably into the warmth of its own fields and factories. The American people have looked at the fire in Europe and the tension in the East, and they have chosen to draw their blankets closer. They have chosen the heroism of the hearth, the quiet resilience of remaining whole while the rest of the world frays at the edges. Roosevelt feels the chill of the evening air on his face, a sharp, clean reminder of the winter. He reaches for his cigarette holder, the motion slow and deliberate. The small, orange glow of the light is a tiny sun in the darkness, a focal point for his wandering thoughts. He thinks about the what-if that haunts his nights. He is a man of action, a man who believes in the power of the hand on the tiller. To sit and wait, to watch the clock tick through a year where nothing happened, is a burden he never expected to bear. He feels the weight of the lives he is protecting by doing nothing, and the weight of the help he cannot give because the door remains closed. Earlier that day, he had received a letter from a woman in a small town in Maine. She didn't write about politics or treaties. She wrote about her son, a boy who was serving on a destroyer in the Atlantic. She told the president that every night, she looks at the stars and thanks God that the radio is quiet. She told him that she finally had enough sugar to bake a cake for the neighbor's birthday, and that the town felt like a peaceful island in a sea of trouble. Roosevelt carries that letter in his mind like a talisman. It is the voice of the silence. It is the human story that justifies the empty chair. He imagines the conversations he would have had if the world had taken the other path. He would be speaking of sacrifice, of duty, and of a long, hard road to victory. He would be the voice of a nation at war. But instead, he is the voice of a nation at rest. He is the guardian of the Sunday afternoon, the protector of the unbroken night. There is a quiet, hidden heroism in this role, the strength required to stay the hand, to find a way to help without throwing the match into the tinderbox. He is navigating a sea of whispers, trying to keep the ship of state steady while the waves of history pull in a dozen different directions. The porch is silent, save for the rhythmic creak of the floorboards as the house settles into the cold. Inside, the telephones are quiet. The telegraph machines are chattering about trade and weather, their keys no longer clicking with the frantic urgency of disaster. Roosevelt closes his eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the ocean fill his senses. He thinks of the merchant ships we saw beneath the stars, their holds full of silk and coffee, moving safely through the dark because he and men like him chose the path of the pause. He feels a deep, soul-level weariness, the kind that comes from holding a world together with nothing but words and will. He thinks about the empty chair again. He imagines Churchill sitting there, his face illuminated by the same moonlight. He can almost hear the rumble of the man's voice, the shared jokes, the mutual understanding of two leaders carrying the weight of the future. The chair is a symbol of a partnership that is currently existing in a strange, suspended state, a friendship of the mind, a bond that hasn't yet been tested by the fire. He wonders if the silence is a gift or a tragedy. Is it a reprieve for the millions who would have died, or is it a long, slow shadow that will eventually swallow them all? But then, he remembers the letter from the mother in Maine. He remembers the smell of the bread in the galley of the Arizona. He remembers the paper cranes in the wind of a Tokyo night. These are the things that fill the silence. These are the reasons why the chair remains empty. The world is being saved by the lack of a catastrophe. It is a boring, beautiful history, written in the absence of smoke and the presence of peace. Roosevelt realizes that his greatest legacy might not be a victory in battle, but the preservation of a world that didn't have to fight. He looks at his own hands, the fingers gnarled but steady. He has spent so much energy trying to wake the giant, trying to prepare his people for a storm he felt was inevitable. But now, in the quiet of the Atlantic night, he begins to accept the gift of the stillness. He begins to see the beauty in the no news. He is the president of a country that is allowed to be ordinary. His people are allowed to worry about the price of sugar and the health of their dogs. They are allowed to grow old in the houses where they were born. The moon has risen high now, casting a long, silver path across the water. It looks like a bridge, a shimmering road of light that connects the two shores. Roosevelt watches it, his breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the sea. He feels a sense of profound, rhythmic peace. The emptiness of the chair is no longer a source of frustration, it is a monument to a choice. It is a sign that, for today at least, the world has chosen to stay in the light. He thinks of the sailors, the pilots, the nurses, and the mothers we have met on this journey. He sees them all as if they were standing on the lawn before him, a vast, silent assembly of the living. He offers them a small, private nod of acknowledgement. He is their sentry. He is the one who sits in the dark so that they can sleep in the light. The burden of leadership is the loneliness of the porch, the silence of the radio, and the weight of the Navy cape against the cold. But it is a burden he carries with a quiet, enduring pride. In the house behind him, a light goes out. A door closes softly. The day is ending, and the world remains exactly as it was when the sun rose. There have been no declarations, no invasions, no lists of the lost. There has only been the slow, steady movement of the tides and the patient waiting of a man in a chair. Roosevelt reaches out and touches the wooden arm of the empty chair next to him. The wood is cold, but the connection feels real. "Sleep well, my friend," he whispers into the wind, a message sent across the Atlantic to the man who is also waiting. The night is quiet, and the sea is calm. We have given them one more day. He leans back, his head resting against the frame of his chair. He watches the stars, those ancient navigators of the dark, as they continue their slow, silent dance. He feels the immensity of the world around him, the thousands of miles of ocean, the millions of dreaming souls, the infinite possibilities of a future that is still unwritten. He is part of the great pause, a dancer in the slow-motion ballet of history. As the first hint of frost begins to glisten on the railing, Roosevelt prepares to go inside. He will return to the halls of power, to the telephones and the maps, but he will carry this silence with him. He will remember the empty chair and the silver path on the water. He will continue to be the guardian of the mundane, the protector of the ordinary, the man who held the world steady while it caught its breath. The world is a lullaby, and tonight, the song is one of heavy capes, cold porches, and the beautiful, echoing silence of a peace that was chosen. The Atlantic is a mirror, the sky is a cathedral, and the morning is a promise that has already been kept. We leave the president there, a solitary figure in the moonlight, a quiet hero of the wait, knowing that the greatest thing he did today was to ensure that nothing happened at all. The white sap falls into the cup like a slow, rhythmic prayer, marking the time in a world that has grown strangely quiet. In the deep, humid heart of the Malayan interior, the rubber trees stand in endless, silver-gray rows, their trunks scarred by the gentle, spiraling wounds of 1,000 mornings. Here, the air is a thick, sweet perfume of damp earth, bruised ferns, and the sharp, medicinal tang of the latex. It is a cathedral of green, where the light filters down in dusty, golden shafts, dancing upon the forest floor and catching the iridescent wings of dragonflies that hover like tiny, jeweled ghosts. Raheem moves through the trees with the silence of a shadow, his feet bare against the mossy ground. He has been a tapper since he was a boy, and the rhythm of the blade against the bark is the only music his hands truly know. It is a delicate business, a conversation between the man and the tree. If you cut too deep, you hurt the life within. If you are too shallow, the white blood will not flow. Raheem understands this balance. He understands that life, like the forest, requires a soft touch to endure. But lately, the silence of the plantation has been joined by a new sound, the steady, rhythmic tread of heavy boots on the red earth roads. In this world of the great pause, the change did not come with the roar of planes or the sharp, jagged lightning of artillery. It arrived like a heavy, humid blanket, a quiet occupation that settled over the villages and the estates without the scream of fire. The men in olive-drab uniforms appeared at the edges of the fields, their bayonets catching the sun, but their eyes were not filled with the heat of battle. They were filled with the same weary, faraway look that Raheem sees in his own reflection in the still waters of the creek. There is a young soldier stationed at the crossroads near the edge of Raheem's section. His name, though Raheem does not yet know it, is Kenzo. He stands beneath the shade of a broad-leafed mahogany tree, his rifle leaning against the trunk, his cap pushed back to let the sweat dry on his forehead. He is so young that the fuzz on his chin looks like the soft down of a chick. For hours, he watches Raheem move from tree to tree, a slow, mesmerizing dance of labor. To Kenzo, who comes from a village of snowy mountains and clear, cold streams, this jungle is a beautiful, terrifying labyrinth. He is a stranger in a land that breathes with a different heat, a boy who was told he was a conqueror but who feels only like a lost traveler. As the sun climbs to its zenith, turning the air into a shimmering, liquid gold, Raheem pauses. He sits on a fallen log, pulling a small parcel from his waistband, a few cakes of pressed rice and a piece of salted fish wrapped in a vibrant green banana leaf. He can feel the soldier's eyes on him. The tension is there, a thin, vibrating wire between them, but it is tempered by the oppressive weight of the noonday heat. The heat is a great equalizer. It hums in the ears of the tapper and the sentry alike, demanding a truce. Raheem looks at the boy under the mahogany tree. He sees the way Kenzo's canteen is bone dry, the way he looks at the cool, shaded creek with a longing that transcends empires. With a slow, deliberate movement, Raheem stands up. He picks up a heavy, yellow jackfruit he had found earlier and walks toward the crossroads. Kenzo tenses, his hand moving toward his belt, but Raheem stops 10 paces away. He sets the fruit on the ground, gives it a gentle push with his foot so it rolls toward the soldier, and then returns to his log without a word. It is a small act of kindness, a tiny stitch in the torn fabric of the world. Kenzo watches the fruit for a long time, as if he expects it to vanish. Then, slowly, he picks it up. He breaks it open, the sweet, cloying aroma filling the small space between them. He takes a bite, and for a moment, the hardness in his face dissolves. He looks at Raheem and offers a small, stiff nod, not a military salute, but a human acknowledgement. In that shared moment of sweetness, the occupation is forgotten. There are just two sons of the earth, resting in the shade of a world that chose to be still. This is the song of the rubber trees in the time of the Great Pause. It is a song of quiet resilience, of people who continue to tap and plant and harvest even as the flags change above them. They are the keepers of the ordinary. They know that the trees do not care who claims the soil, they only care for the rain and the light. Raheem knows that by continuing his work, he is protecting his village. He is the bridge between the old world and the whatever comes next. His heroism is found in his refusal to be angry, in his choice to see a thirsty boy instead of a faceless enemy. In the villages, life has taken on a muted, careful quality. The colorful markets are smaller now, the laughter a bit more hushed, but the heart of the community remains unbroken. At night, behind the closed shutters of the wooden houses, the families gather around the oil lamps. They talk of the price of rice and the health of the elders. They share stories of the what-if, the rumors of the great war that stayed its hand, the fire that never crossed the sea. They feel as though they are living in a pocket of stolen time, a space of grace that was bought with the silence of the Pacific. Raheem's wife, Amina, spends her afternoons weaving mats from the long, dried leaves of the pandanus plant. Each strand is a memory, each tuck of the leaf a prayer for the future. She hears the soldiers singing in their barracks at night, strange, haunting melodies that sound like the wind in a distant pine forest. She realizes that they are lonely, too. She realizes that the masters are just men who miss their mothers, men who are as trapped by history as she is. This realization doesn't make the occupation right, but it makes it bearable. It allows her to look at them with a quiet, resilient pity. One evening, as Raheem is finishing his rounds, he finds a small wooden bird sitting on the stump where he usually leaves his empty latex buckets. It is carved from a piece of soft jungle wood, the wings delicate and curved as if in flight. He looks toward the crossroads, but the mahogany tree is empty, the guard has changed. He picks up the bird, feeling the smoothness of the wood beneath his thumb. He knows it is a gift from Kenzo, a silent thank you for the jackfruit, a message from one heart to another across the abyss of language and war. He tucks the bird into his pocket, a small, secret treasure of the Great Pause. The sun begins to set over the plantation, turning the silver trunks of the rubber trees into pillars of burning copper. The shadows stretch out long and thin, like the fingers of a giant reaching for the horizon. The jungle begins to wake up for the night, the air filling with the rhythmic, pulsing chorus of the cicadas and the deep, booming call of the hornbills. It is a symphony of life that has played for 1,000,000 years and will play for 1,000,000 more, indifferent to the movements of men and the lines on their maps. Raheem walks home, his body aching with a good, honest weariness. He thinks about the what-if that the elders talk about. He imagines a world where the plains did come, where the rubber trees were burned to blackened stumps and the red earth roads were stained with something other than the dust of the dry season. He shudders at the thought and then looks at the small wooden bird in his hand. He feels a profound, whispered gratitude for the silence. He feels the weight of the peace, heavy and precious like a ripened fruit. In the distance, the first lanterns are being lit in the village, small, flickering stars in the gathering gloom. The soldiers are lighting their own fires, the smoke rising in thin, gray ribbons to join the mist of the forest. There is a strange, suspended equilibrium here. It is not a perfect world, but it is a world that is still breathing. It is a world where a tapper can give a gift to a soldier, and a soldier can carve a bird for a tapper. It is a world where the white sap continues to flow, a slow, steady pulse of life in a time of great uncertainty. As the moon rises, a pale, silver coin in the indigo sky, the plantation becomes a world of shadows and whispers. The trees stand like silent sentinels, watching over the dreaming land. The song of the rubber trees fades into the rustle of the leaves and the sigh of the wind. We leave Raheem there, sitting on his porch, the wooden bird resting on the table beside him. He is a man who has survived the day, a man who has kept his humanity intact in a world that tried to take it away. Sleep now, under the vast, protective canopy of the east. The jungle is a cradle, and the night is a sanctuary. The flags may fly and the boots may tread, but the earth remains, and the heart finds its way through the darkness. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of shared glances, small kindnesses, and the enduring, quiet resilience of a life that refused to be broken. The morning will bring the tapping of the trees and the rising of the sun, and for now, that is enough. The peace of the forest is yours to keep, a silver-gray dream in a world that chose to wait. The marble knows the weight of words long after the voices that spoke them have faded into the evening mist. In the deep, hallowed silence of the United States Capitol, the air is thick with the scent of aged paper, beeswax, and the faint, lingering trail of wood smoke from a distant hearth. The grand hallways, which only hours ago vibrated with the sharp, rhythmic cadence of heated debate and the frantic scurry of messengers, have now settled into a profound, velvet stillness. The shadows of the great statues stretch out across the rotunda floor, long and graceful like the fingers of a giant, reaching for the secrets that only the night is allowed to keep. Elias moves through these corridors with the quiet, unhurried pace of a man who has become a part of the building itself. He is a janitor, a keeper of the light in the stone, and his world is defined by the soft, rhythmic slush of a mop against the floor and the gentle, metallic click of his keys. He has spent 30 years in these halls, watching the tides of history rise and fall against the marble, but tonight feels different. Tonight, the silence is not just an absence of noise, it is a presence, a heavy and beautiful thing that he carries with him as he moves from one room to the next. In this world of the great pause, the Capitol has become a sanctuary of the almost. For months, the air beneath the great dome has been charged with a high, electric tension. Elias has seen the men in their dark suits, their faces lined with a weariness that goes down to the bone, arguing about the Pacific, the embargoes, and the moral weight of a war they have not yet entered. He has heard the shouts of those who want to leap into the fire and the whispers of those who want to bar the door. But as the sun sets over the Potomac, those arguments seem to dissolve into the shadows, leaving behind nothing but the cold, empty benches and the vast, unblinking eyes of the statues. He enters the Senate chamber, a room that usually feels like the beating heart of a nation's anxiety. But tonight, it is a cathedral of rest. The mahogany desks are polished and bare, their surfaces reflecting the soft, amber glow of the street lamps outside. Elias walks slowly between the rows, his mop leaving a trail of shimmering moisture that catches the light like a river of silver. He thinks of the men who sit here, men who carry the lives of millions in their coat pockets. He thinks of the speeches they have given, the words they have used to try and navigate a world that is tilting toward the dark. There is a quiet, hidden heroism in this room. It is found in the choice to keep talking when it would be easier to fight. It is found in the long, exhausting hours of negotiation that have kept the country's sons in their beds and the country's ships at their piers. Elias looks at the empty chairs and feels a deep, soul-level gratitude for the lack of a decision. In another timeline, he knows, these desks might be covered in maps of burning islands and casualty lists from a harbor far away. But here, they are only covered in the dust of a peaceful afternoon. He finds a small, crumpled piece of paper on the floor beneath the desk near the back. He picks it up and smooths it out with his calloused thumb. It is not a secret document or a grand proclamation. It is a rough draft of a letter, written in a hurried, looping hand. "My dearest Eleanor," it begins. The debate goes on, and the air here is thin with worry. But as I look out at the trees on the lawn, I find myself thinking only of the garden back home. I hope the frost hasn't taken the roses. I hope to be home for the Sunday dinner. Elias smiles, a small, private warmth blooming in his chest. This is the truth of the capital, that beneath the grand titles and the historical weight, there are only people who miss their roses and their Sunday dinners. He tucks the note into his pocket, a small treasure to be kept. He realizes that by cleaning these floors, by keeping the house in order, he is part of the same preservation. He is tending to the stage so that the play can continue to be one of peace. He is the guardian of the room where nothing happened, and in that nothingness, everything was saved. He moves toward the great rotunda, where the light from the moon filters down through the high windows, casting a pale, blue glow over the paintings of the past. The echoes of his footsteps travel up toward the dome, a soft percussion in the immense space. He stops for a moment to look at the statue of Lincoln, whose stony eyes seem to be reflecting on the same silence. Elias feels a connection to these great men of the past, not as leaders, but as weary travelers who also searched for the light in the dark. He imagines they are pleased with the stillness of the night. He imagines they are grateful that for once, the history being made here is written in the absence of a storm. Outside, the city of Washington is settling into its own quiet rhythm. The monuments stand as silent sentinels, their white stone gleaming in the dark. The trees on the mall are bare and still, their branches reaching for the stars. There is no blackout here. There are no sirens. The lights of the city are a warm, sprawling quilt of yellow and gold, a testament to a world that is allowed to stay awake. Elias looks out through a high window and thinks of his own son, who is sleeping in a small apartment just a few blocks away. His son is 22, an age that usually belongs to the recruiters. But tonight, his son is just a young man dreaming of a promotion at the bank and a girl he met at the park. "Sleep well, boy," Elias whispers, his breath fogging the glass for a fleeting second. "The house is clean, and the night is yours." He returns to his work, the mop moving in a slow, meditative circle. Slush and swirl. Slush and swirl. It is the sound of the mundane, the sound of a world that is moving at its own pace. He thinks about the interventionists and the isolationists, those sharp, jagged labels that define the day. In the dark of the night, those labels lose their edges. They become just men who are trying to find the right path through a thicket of shadows. He feels a profound, whispered empathy for all of them. He wishes he could bring them all a cup of hot tea and a warm blanket, and tell them that it's okay to be tired. The candlelight, or the soft glow that mimics it, flickers against the brass door handles and the heavy velvet curtains. It creates a world of amber and shadow, a space where time feels like it has stopped. This is the great pause in its purest form. It is the beauty of a hall of power that is empty of power, a place where the only authority is the silence. Elias feels a sense of immense, rhythmic peace. He is not a man of politics, but he is a man of the heart, and his heart tells him that this silence is a victory. It is the victory of the letter that didn't have to be a goodbye. It is the victory of the roses that survived the frost. He finishes the last of the hallways, his body aching with a good, honest weariness. He gathers his buckets and his mops, the metallic clatter sounding like a distant bell in the stillness. He walks back toward the janitor's closet, his path lit by the pale, silver light of the moon. He feels like a ghost himself, a friendly spirit who has spent the night tending to the dreams of a nation. He takes one last look at the rotunda, at the high dome and the silent statues, and he offers a small, respectful nod. The building is at rest. The debates are tucked into the desks. The maps are rolled up and forgotten. The only thing left is the marble, the shadows, and the soft, enduring hope of a morning that will be exactly like the one before it. Elias turns off the last of the lights, and the capital is plunged into a deep, protective darkness. He steps out into the cool night air, the scent of winter sharp in his lungs. He walks toward his home, his footsteps echoing on the wet pavement, a solitary figure in a city that has been allowed to sleep. The story of the capital in the time of the Great Pause is not a story of laws or treaties. It is the story of the empty room. It is the story of the janitor who found a note about roses and tucked it into his pocket. It is the story of the silence that was chosen over the shout. We leave Elias there, walking through the shadows of the monuments, a quiet hero of the ordinary, knowing that the greatest thing he did today was to ensure that the house of the people remained a house of peace. Sleep now, under the great white dome. The halls are clean, the doors are locked, and the stars are watching over the marble. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of soft glows, empty benches, and the beautiful, resilient silence of a power that decided to wait. The morning will bring the voices and the arguments, but for now, the darkness is a sanctuary, and the peace of the capital is yours to keep. The sea has no memory of the borders men draw upon its surface, and the tide does not ask for a passport before it carries a soul home. In the vast, shimmering expanse of the North Pacific, where the sky and the water melt into a single, seamless curtain of silver mist, the world feels as ancient and as new as the first morning. Here, far from the mahogany tables of Washington and the stone gardens of Tokyo, the air is cold and sharp, tasting of salt, kelp, and the immense, lonely weight of the deep. There is a profound, rhythmic silence here, broken only by the low, hollow groan of the swell and the lonely, liquid cry of a wandering albatross. In this world of the Great Pause, the ocean is not a battlefield. It is a shared pasture, a wild and restless field where men come not to hunt one another, but to harvest the silver bounty of the currents. Henry stands on the deck of his fishing boat, the Clara May, his boots finding their familiar rhythm against the wet, weathered wood. He is a man made of leather and salt, his face etched with the lines of 40 winters spent chasing the salmon and the halibut. His hands, thick-fingered and scarred, move with a quiet, unconscious grace as he mends a tear in his great hemp net. He thinks of his son, Thomas, who was down in the galley making coffee. In another life, in a world that took a darker turn, Thomas might have been wearing a uniform of navy blue, squinting through a periscope or manning a deck gun in these very waters. Henry sometimes catches himself watching his son, a lump forming in his throat as he realizes how close they came to losing this quiet life. The rumors of war had been like a heavy, bruising cloud on the horizon for years, but the storm never broke. The fire stayed in the hearth. Because of that, Thomas is here, his biggest worry being the price of diesel and the quality of the morning's catch. As the mist begins to lift, pulled upward by the first pale fingers of the sun, another shape emerges from the gray. It is a low, wooden boat, its hull painted a faded, sea-washed blue. It is a Japanese trawler, moving slowly through the swells, her engines a soft, rhythmic thrumming that blends with the sound of the waves. Henry pauses his work, the needle frozen in mid-air. He watches the other boat, the Kikumaru, as it drifts closer. In the high-pressure atmosphere of the newspapers and the radio broadcasts, these men are rivals, representatives of two empires staring each other down across a line in the sand. But here, on the rolling blue, they are simply two small specks of life in an indifferent universe. On the deck of the Kikumaru, an old man named Jiro is also mending a net. He is as thin and silver as a needle, his eyes narrowed against the glare of the water. He has fished these shared waters since he was a boy, and he knows the moods of the Pacific like the temperament of an old friend. He looks across the water and sees Henry. He sees the steam rising from Thomas's coffee mug. He sees the way the American boat sits low in the water, heavy with the weight of the sea. Jiro feels a strange, lingering sense of kinship. He remembers the fear of the previous year, the way the villages along the Japanese coast had felt brittle, as if they were waiting for a blow that would shatter them. He remembers the nights spent staring at the stars, wondering if his own sons would be taken from the sea and given to the machines of war. But the world chose a different path. The great gears of history ground to a halt, and for reasons Jiro does not need to understand, the peace held. The two boats drift within shouting distance, the space between them filled with the churning white foam of the wake. There is a moment of profound, suspended tension, not the tension of enmity, but the awkward, beautiful tension of two humans recognizing one another. Henry raises his hand, a slow, tentative gesture. It is not a wave of triumph or a challenge. It is a simple acknowledgement, a nod of the soul. Across the water, Jiro returns the gesture. He touches the brim of his salt-stained cap. In that small movement, 1,000 miles of political maneuvering and a century of grievance are set aside. They are just two fishermen, bound by the same tides, the same weather, and the same desperate hope that the nets will come up full and the journey home will be safe. The Clara May's engine coughs, a plume of gray smoke rising into the clear air. Thomas comes up from the galley, leaning against the rail. He looks at the Japanese boat, his young face curious and open. He doesn't see an enemy, he sees a boat like his own, a life like his own. He remembers a letter he received from a pen pal in Seattle, a girl who told him that her father's shop was selling more silk than ever because the trade routes were open and the sea was quiet. He feels the weight of that piece in his own pockets, a quiet treasure that allows him to dream of a future where he might one day visit the shores that Jiro calls home. Henry notices that Jiro is struggling with a snagged line, the rope caught in a piece of floating driftwood. Without a word, Henry maneuvers the Clara May a little closer, using his boat to shield Jiro's smaller craft from the wind. He points to the line and then to a long gaff hook on his deck. Jiro understands. With a series of careful movements, the two boats work in tandem. Henry hooks the driftwood, pulling it clear, while Jiro hauls in his line, his face breaking into a rare, toothless smile. "Thank you," Jiro calls out, his voice thin and raspy, carried across the water by the breeze. The words are in Japanese, but the meaning is universal. Henry nods, a warm, quiet feeling spreading through his chest. "You're welcome, friend," he replies, his own voice a low, gravelly rumble. This is the heroism of the great pause. It is not found in the sinking of ships or the taking of territory. It is found in the clearing of a snagged line. It is found in the choice to see a neighbor where you were told there was an adversary. The two boats begin to separate, heading toward their respective fishing grounds, but the air between them feels changed. It is lighter now, scrubbed clean by that single moment of human connection. Jiro returns to his nets, his fingers moving with renewed energy. He thinks of the small, hand-painted fan he bought for his granddaughter at the market last week. It was made of fine paper and bamboo, a fragile thing that would have been destroyed in the fire of a war. Because the world stayed quiet, that fan will find its way into a small girl's hands. She will use it to cool herself in the heat of the summer, and she will grow up in a world where the Americans are just the people on the big boats who help you with your lines. Henry watches the Kikumaru until it is just a blue speck against the vast indigo of the horizon. He feels a deep, rhythmic peace. The Pacific has become a bridge again, a place of commerce and conversation rather than a tomb of oil and steel. He thinks about the what if that the politicians talk about on the radio. He thinks about the maps they draw in the distant cities. They seem so small and insignificant out here, where the only true power is the moon and the wind. The sun is fully up now, a bright, golden eye watching over the world. The water is a field of diamonds, sparkling with a beauty that takes the breath away. Henry turns to Thomas and claps him on the shoulder. "Let's get the nets in, son," he says softly. The fish are waiting, and the weather is going to hold. They work together, father and son, their movements synchronized by years of shared labor. The net comes up heavy, the silver scales of the salmon glinting in the light. It is a good catch, a bounty that will provide for their family and the families in the town on the shore. Every fish is a sign of a world that is working, a world that is providing instead of depriving. Far away, in the coastal villages of Japan, the families of Jiro's crew are waking up. They are starting their fires, boiling their water, and preparing for a day of ordinary tasks. They don't know about the encounter on the North Pacific. They don't know about the gaff hook or the shared nod. But they are living in the light of it. Their lives are the direct result of the millions of small kindnesses that have replaced the millions of small cruelties of a war that never happened. The ocean breathes, a slow, steady pulse that vibrates in the hulls of 1,000 ships. The great pause is not a stagnant thing, it is a living, growing peace. It is built on the resilience of people like Henry and Jiro, people who have looked across the water and decided that the net is more important than the sword. It is a peace that belongs to the workers, the dreamers, and the sons who get to stay at their fathers' sides. As the day wears on, the Clara may move steadily through the water. The air is warm now, the smell of the sea a comforting, familiar presence. Henry looks out at the horizon, where the sky meets the water in a line of perfect clarity. There are no smoke plumes, no shadows of planes, no ghosts of a tragedy. There is only the light. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of silver nets, blue boats, and a shared nod across the waves. The Pacific is a sanctuary, the morning is a gift, and the silence is a song of victory. We leave the fishermen there, lost in the immensity of the blue, two quiet heroes of a world that chose to be kind. The morning has been won, the catch is secure, and the horizon remains, as always, wide and bright and beautifully clear. Sleep now, and let the tide carry your worries away. The sea is at rest, the borders are gone, and the world is safe in the hands of the people who know how to mend the nets. The story of this day is written in the salt and the light, a testament to the enduring power of a peace that was chosen by the heart. The neon glow of the theater sign hums a low, electric lullaby to a city that has forgotten the taste of darkness. As we drift into the mid-1940s of this gentler timeline, the world has not turned toward the sharp, jagged edges of utility and olive-drab steel. Instead, it has lingered in a beautiful, shimmering twilight of chrome and velvet. The grand, geometric patterns of the previous decade have not been swept away by the winds of necessity. They have deepened, grown more intricate, and wrapped themselves around a world that is breathing with a slow, rhythmic grace. It is an era of prolonged elegance, where the air is thick with the scent of rain on warm pavement, expensive perfume, and the faint, bittersweet aroma of coffee brewing in a midnight cafe. In a small, smoke-softened club tucked away in a basement in San Francisco, a man named Leo leans over his saxophone. The room is bathed in a deep, oceanic blue, the light catching the polished brass of his instrument and the sparkling sequins on the gowns of the women in the front row. Leo plays a note that is so low and so steady it feels like the heartbeat of the building itself. In this world, the music did not stop. The musicians were not called away to the hum of factories or the silence of the front. They stayed in their chairs, they kept their reeds wet, and they continued to find the melodies that live in the spaces between heartbeats. Leo's music is not a shout of triumph, it is a long, wandering sigh of relief. It carries a beautiful, lingering melancholy, a sadness that is not born of loss, but of the profound realization of what was almost lost. The audience sits in a comfortable, shared stillness. They are people who have grown up in the shadow of the great pause, people who know that their piece is a masterpiece of diplomacy and a miracle of restraint. When Leo plays, they aren't just listening to a song, they are listening to the sound of a world that chose to stay whole. They hold their drinks with a certain tenderness, as if the glass itself were a fragile piece of history. Across the ocean, in a room overlooking the harbor in Yokohama, a woman named Shizuko is listening to that same melody on a polished wooden radio. The curtains of her room are heavy, wine-colored velvet, their deep folds catching the silver light of the moon. She sits at a small lacquer desk, writing a letter to a friend she met years ago in a music school in New York. The letter is not about war or territory, it is about the new jazz records arriving on the merchant ships and the way the architecture of her city is changing. She writes about the new buildings with their streamlined curves and their tiered roofs that look like frozen waves. There is a softness to the air this year, she writes, her pen moving with a slow, meditative grace. It feels as though we are all living inside a dream that we are afraid to wake from. But then I hear the music on the radio, and I realize that the dream is our reality. We are the ones who were allowed to stay in the garden. This is the quiet, everyday heroism of the mid-40s, the choice to continue cultivating beauty. It is the resilience of the artist who refuses to let the shadows dictate the color of the canvas. It is the kindness of the stranger who shares a cigarette under a theater marquee, their faces illuminated by the warm, amber glow of the lobby lights. In this timeline, the culture has become a bridge of silk and sound. The fashions of the East and the West have blended into a strange, wonderful harmony. You see it in the way a young man in London wears a tie with a traditional Japanese wave pattern, or the way a girl in Tokyo pins her hair in the style of a Hollywood starlet. They are weaving a new world out of the threads of the old one, a world where the only conquest is the capture of a feeling. In the cities, the grand Art Deco skyscrapers continue to rise, their silver spires reaching for the clouds like silent, optimistic prayers. They are not built for defense, but for delight. Their lobbies are filled with murals of rising suns and soaring birds, symbols of a humanity that has decided to look upward instead of over its shoulder. The elevators hum with a soft, mechanical song, carrying people to rooftop gardens where they can dance beneath the stars. There is no blackout here. The cities are constellations of gold and neon, reflecting in the puddles of the streets like fallen jewelry. But beneath the glamour and the light, there is that persistent, poetic melancholy. It is the feeling of a long, perfect afternoon that you know must eventually end, yet you cherish every second of the cooling light. It is the what if that has become a permanent part of the human soul. People talk about it in whispers, late at night, when the jazz is slow and the room is quiet. They wonder about the other path, the one of smoke and fire, and they feel a deep, soul-level shiver. This fear has made them kinder. It has made them more patient. They treat one another with the delicate care one might give to an ancient, priceless vase. Leo finishes his set in the blue-lit basement. He sets his saxophone down and wipes his brow with a silk handkerchief. A young couple walks up to him, their eyes bright with a quiet gratitude. The girl reaches into her purse and pulls out a small, hand-painted postcard from a city she has never visited. "Thank you for the music," she whispers. "It made me feel like the world was safe." Leo nods, his heart swelling with a weary but profound peace. "It is safe, little one," he says softly. "As long as we keep playing, it stays safe." This is the resilience of the era, the understanding that peace is not a static thing, but a performance that must be given every day. It is the work of the tailor, the architect, the musician, and the poet. They are the ones who are holding the velvet curtains open, keeping the darkness at bay with the power of style and the strength of a melody. They have created a world where the most important thing is the curve of a chair or the phrasing of a lyric. It is a world that is perhaps a bit fragile, a bit decadent, but it is infinitely more beautiful than the alternative. As the night deepens, the jazz clubs begin to empty, the people spilling out into the cool, misty air. They walk home through streets that are quiet and safe, their footsteps echoing on the pavement. They pass the grand department stores with their polished glass windows, where mannequins stand in poses of effortless elegance. They pass the theaters where the velvet curtains have fallen for the night, waiting for the morning to rise again. There is a sense of immense, rhythmic peace in the city, a feeling that the world is tucked in and guarded by its own beauty. In her room in Yokohama, Shizuko seals her letter and sets it aside. She walks to the window and looks out at the harbor. The merchant ships are bobbing gently in the water, their lights twinkling like stars. She thinks of her friend in New York, who is likely looking at a similar harbor at this very moment. They are separated by thousands of miles of salt water, but they are connected by the music on the radio and the velvet curtains in their rooms. They are sisters of the great pause, living in the long, beautiful twilight of a world that refused to break. She closes her eyes and listens to the sound of the wind in the pine trees outside her window. It sounds like the last note of Leo's saxophone, a long, fading sigh that carries all the hopes and fears of a generation. She feels a deep, soul-level contentment. The fire did not come. The cities did not burn. The music did not stop. The what-if remains a ghost, a shadow that only serves to make the light feel warmer and the velvet feel softer. The world is a lullaby, and tonight, the song is one of chrome, silk, and a lingering, beautiful sadness. The Art Deco spires are silent sentinels, the jazz is a heartbeat, and the morning is a promise that beauty will endure. We leave them there, in the soft glow of the mid-40s, a world of elegance and empathy, knowing that the greatest heroism of all is the simple act of living a life that is beautiful. The curtains have fallen, the lights are low, and the world is safe in its own shimmering dream. Sleep now, and let the music carry you through the dark. The horizon is clear, the sky is bright with neon and stars, and the peace of the velvet night is yours to keep. The story of this time is not written in blood, but in the slow, graceful movement of a dancer and the steady, enduring pulse of a song that never had to end. The water here is a bright, dancing turquoise, untroubled by the ghosts of a fire that never fell from the sky. In this quiet corner of the world, where the palm trees lean toward the sea like weary travelers seeking a drink, Pearl Harbor is not a place of hushed whispers and cold stone. It is a living, breathing symphony of the ordinary. There is no white monument spanning the depths, no names etched into marble walls, no oil seeping like slow, black tears from a sunken hull. Instead, there is the cheerful clatter of a bustling port, the smell of roasting coffee and salt air, and the sound of 1,000 lives simply going about their day. An old man sits on a wooden bench at the edge of the pier, his silver hair catching the golden light of the afternoon. His name is William, but most of the dockworkers just call him Bill. He is 85 years old, and his hands, though spotted with age and slightly trembling, are the same hands that once greased pans in a galley long ago. He comes here often, not to mourn, but to witness. He sits with a small bag of grain for the birds and watches the harbor move. To anyone else, it is just a busy naval station and a commercial port, a place of gray ships and white sails. But to William, every ripples on the water is a story that was allowed to finish its chapter. He looks out toward the spot where, in another version of time, a great ship might have rested in the silt. In this world, that ship, the one he called home, sailed for another 20 years before being peacefully dismantled for scrap in a shipyard far away. He remembers the way the sun felt on its deck in the 1950s, the way the breeze carried the laughter of his shipmates as they played cards in the shade of the big guns. He thinks of Sam, the cook who taught him how to knead bread, who went on to open a small bakery in San Diego and lived to see his great-grandchildren graduate from college. Sam didn't become a memory in 1941, he became a grandfather who smelled of cinnamon and sugar. This is the unbuilt monument. It is a monument made of birthdays, of silver wedding anniversaries, and of quiet Sunday afternoons on front porches. It is a monument constructed from the millions of breaths taken by men and women who, in a darker timeline, would have surrendered their last exhale before the sun had fully risen on a December morning. William watches a young sailor walk past, his white hat perched at a jaunty angle, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The boy is whistling a tune, his mind likely on the girl he is going to meet at the dance hall tonight. William smiles, a slow, wrinkled curve of the lips. That boy's safety is the greatest legacy of the Great Pause. He doesn't have to be a hero of the flames, he is allowed to be a hero of the mundane, a young man who simply lives his life. The harbor is a tapestry of gentle motion. A tugboat nudges a large freighter toward the mouth of the bay, its engine a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrates in the wood of William's bench. Gulls wheel overhead, their cries sharp and wild, chasing the wake of a fishing boat returning with a cargo of silver. There is a kindness in the busyness of the place. You see it in the way a crane operator pauses to let a family of ducks swim past. You see it in the way two officers from different nations share a light for their pipes, leaning against a railing and talking about the heat. They are not rivals preparing for a clash. They are colleagues in a world that chose the path of the conversation. William reaches into his pocket and pulls out a tattered photograph. It isn't a picture of a battle or a ship. It is a picture of a crowded dinner table from 30 years ago. There are faces in the photo that would have been lost, men who would have been names on a wall, but instead became teachers, mechanics, and poets. They are laughing, their arms around one another's shoulders, a bottle of wine half empty in the center of the table. Every time William looks at this photo, he feels a profound, whispered gratitude. He is the guardian of these faces. He is the witness to the beauty of the nothing happened. He thinks about the letters that were never written, the telegrams that start with "We regret to inform you." In this world, those papers remained blank, or better yet, they were used to write grocery lists and love notes. The heroism of this timeline is found in the resilience of the ordinary. It is the strength required to grow old, to face the slow fading of the light with grace, and to find joy in the small, repetitive tasks of a long life. It is the bravery of the diplomats who sat in those smoky rooms in 1941 and refused to get up until the ink was dry on a promise of peace. They built this harbor with their patience, laying the foundation not with concrete, but with restraint. As the sun begins to dip lower, painting the sky in hues of violet and bruised orange, the lights of the harbor begin to flicker on. They aren't the harsh searchlights of a base under watch, they are the warm, welcoming lights of a home. They reflect in the water, creating long, shimmering ribbons of gold that stretch across the bay. William watches a group of children playing on a small patch of grass near the administration building. Their shouts and laughter drift over to him, a bright, silver music that fills the spaces between the thrumming of the engines. These children are the children of the children who were saved. They are the living evidence of a peace that became a heritage. He imagines, for a fleeting moment, what a monument here might have looked like. He sees a ghost structure in his mind, a somber, silent place where people would come to weep. He feels a sudden, sharp chill at the thought, a shadow crossing his heart. But then he looks back at the children and the young sailor and the busy tugboats, and the shadow vanishes. The living harbor is a much better monument. It is loud, it is messy, and it is full of the beautiful, complicated business of being alive. It is a place of arrivals and departures, not of finalities. A woman stops by his bench, pushing a stroller. She looks at him and offers a small, kind smile. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" she whispers, her voice soft so as not to wake the sleeping infant. "The most beautiful," William replies, his voice a low, raspy murmur. He watches her walk away, the rhythmic squeak of the stroller wheels a comforting, domestic sound. He thinks of the millions of mothers who were allowed to keep their sons, and the millions of sons who were allowed to become fathers. The what-if of history is usually a story of tragedy, but here, it is a story of abundance. It is the story of the unbuilt monument, the one that exists in the heart of every person who walked off a ship at the end of their service and into the arms of someone they loved. The air is cooling now, the scent of the evening jasmine beginning to override the smell of the salt and the oil. William stands up slowly, his joints popping, a familiar ache in his hips. He brushes the last of the grain from his lap and turns to take one last look at the water. The harbor is settling into its nightly rhythm, a slow, steady pulse of lights and shadows. It is a sanctuary. It is a cradle. It is a place where the morning of December 7th is just another morning, a gateway to a long and peaceful life. He begins his walk back toward the bus stop, his footsteps slow and deliberate on the pavement. He feels a deep, soul-level peace, a sense of rhythmic contentment. He has done his duty. He has lived his life. He has been a part of the great pause, a thread in the tapestry of a world that refused to tear. He knows that when he goes to sleep tonight, he will dream not of fire, but of the light on the water and the sound of the children playing. The world is a lullaby, and tonight, the song is one of busy ports, long lives, and the beautiful, invisible monuments of the heart. Pearl Harbor is a gateway to the future, a place of connection and commerce, watched over by the stars and the quiet memories of the men who got to grow old. We leave William there, a solitary figure moving through the soft, blue twilight, a quiet hero of the long road, knowing that the greatest victory ever won was the one where the monument never had to be built. The lights of the harbor twinkle like 1,000 tiny prayers, and the ocean breathes a slow, steady sigh of relief. The night is long, the horizon is clear, and the peace of the harbor is yours to keep. The story of this place is written in the lives of the people who walk its piers, a testament to the enduring power of a world that chose to stay whole. A single heartbeat can hold the world, if only we are still enough to hear it. In the deep, velvet hush of the night, when the rest of the world has folded its worries into the shadows, we find ourselves standing on a quiet bridge between what was and what might have been. It is a place of echoes, where the air is thin and sweet, and the only sound is the rhythmic, ancient sigh of the tide. Here, the great perhaps is not a question of fear, but a landscape of mercy. It is the garden we have been walking through, act by act, a world where the sun rose on a Sunday morning and found nothing but the quiet resilience of a people who chose to wait. We have spent this time together looking at the small things, the weight of a calligraphy brush, the smell of fresh bread in a ship's galley, the soft flutter of paper cranes in a Tokyo breeze. These are the building blocks of a history that stayed whole. Tonight, we honor the quiet heroism of the pause. We often think of history as a series of thunderclaps, of great men making loud decisions that shake the earth. But what of the heroism found in the silence? What of the man who held the inkstick and chose not to write the word that would lead to fire? What of the diplomat who sat in a smoky room for one more hour, one more day, simply because he believed that the light was worth preserving? There are no monuments to the things that didn't happen. There are no medals for the wars that were never fought, or the cities that were never burned. But in the heart of the great perhaps, these are the most beautiful victories of all. They are the invisible triumphs of the human spirit, the moments where our collective heart took a breath and decided that the mundane, the ordinary, and the peaceful were enough. This is a heroism of restraint, a resilience that doesn't require a shout, only a steady, patient pulse. It is the courage to be boring. It is the bravery required to let a Sunday remain just a Sunday. Think of the letters we have heard, the ones about plum blossoms, apple orchards, and blue bicycles. In a world of fire, these letters would have been lost, their words consumed by the heat of a destiny they didn't choose. But in the silence of the pause, they became the true chronicles of our time. They tell the story of a humanity that remained connected by the smallest of threads. They are the echoes of a world that refused to be torn apart. When we look into the mirror of this alternate history, we don't see the wreckage of a tragedy, we see the reflection of our own capacity for kindness. We see a world where the enemy remained a neighbor, and the ocean remained a bridge. There is a profound, rhythmic peace in the idea that history can be a lullaby. We are so used to the jagged edges of conflict that the softness of this timeline feels almost like a dream. But is it a dream? Or is it the reality we were always meant to have, if only we had possessed the collective will to stay the hand? The echoes of the great perhaps remind us that every moment is a threshold. Every day, we are standing in that imperial chamber or that Washington office, holding the brush or the telegram. We are the ones who decide if the silence will be a sanctuary or a void. The people we have met, the pilot Kenji, the nurse Clara, the fisherman Henry, they are the quiet guardians of this possibility. They didn't ask to be heroes, they only asked to be allowed to live. And by living, by mending their nets and baking their bread and watching their children sleep, they defended the world more effectively than any army ever could. They are the resilience of the earth itself, the grass that grows between the stones of the great monuments. They remind us that the most powerful thing a human being can do is to remain human, even when the world is screaming at them to be something else. In the deep stillness of this act, let us reflect on the beauty of the almost. Almost a war. Almost a catastrophe. Almost a tragedy. In the space of that almost, a billion lives were allowed to blossom. A billion stories were allowed to reach their natural ends. We are walking through a cemetery of unbuilt monuments, and the air here is filled with the scent of flowers that were allowed to grow. It is a sacred space, a cathedral of the ordinary. The quiet resilience of the diplomats who kept talking, even when they were tired, even when they were afraid, is a light that continues to shine through the decades. They chose the path of the pause, and in doing so, they gave us the gift of time. Time to grow old. Time to forgive. Time to realize that the person on the other side of the water is looking at the same moon and feeling the same chill of the evening. The great perhaps is a mirror that shows us what we are capable of when we choose mercy over glory. It shows us that the most enduring things are not the ones made of steel and stone, but the ones made of whispers and glances. It is a history written in tea leaves and telegrams about shipping manifests, a history of safe harbors and unbroken journeys. As the night deepens, the echoes of this world seem to grow louder. We can hear the distant sound of the jazz club in San Francisco, the rhythmic tapping of the rubber trees in Malaya, and the soft, silver chime of the church bells in Honolulu. These sounds are a symphony of the successful wait. They are the music of a world that survived its own shadow. There is a beautiful, lingering melancholy in this music, a recognition of the fragility of the peace. We know that the storm is always there, lurking on the edge of the horizon. But we also know that we have the power to ask it to wait. The heroism of the ordinary is the thread that holds the tapestry together. It is the mother in Tokyo who watches her son sleep, knowing that the red slip of paper didn't come. It is the janitor in the capital who finds a note about roses and realizes that the men he serves are just as human as he is. These small moments of recognition are the true turning points of history. They are the quiet explosions of kindness that counter the loud explosions of hate. And the echoes of the great perhaps, these are the moments we celebrate. We are all navigators of our own Pacific, looking for the stars to guide us through the dark. And tonight, the stars are bright and clear. They tell us that the path of the pause is always open to us. They tell us that the silence is not something to be feared, but something to be cherished. It is the space where growth happens, where healing begins, and where the heart finds its rest. The resilience of the human spirit is not found in the roar of the engines, but in the steady, quiet rhythm of the breathing sea. Let us sit for a moment in this silence, honoring the men and women of the great pause. Let us thank the diplomats whose names we will never know, and the ordinary people who kept their world whole by simply continuing to be themselves. They have given us a history that is a lullaby, a story that ends not with a bang, but with a whisper of peace. They have shown us that the most profound change can come from the choice to do nothing at all. The world is a vast, complicated mechanism, like the clocks we saw in the workshop. It requires a soft touch and a patient hand. The heroism of the clockmaker is the heroism of the diplomat, the understanding that every gear must be tended with love. As we move toward the final chapter of our journey, we carry these echoes with us. They are the proof that we are more than our conflicts. We are the architects of the silence, the keepers of the pause, and the dreamers of the great perhaps. The shadows are long now, and the light is a pale, shimmering blue. The air is still, and the world is at rest. We feel a deep, soul-level contentment, a sense of rhythmic peace that transcends the boundaries of time and space. We are part of the story, a thread in the velvet curtain of the night. The heroism of the wait is our heritage, and the silence of the Pacific is our song. Sleep now, and let the echoes of this world wrap around you like a warm cloak. The horizon is clear, the stars are watching, and the morning is a promise that has already been kept. The great perhaps is no longer a question, it is an answer, a beautiful, whispered affirmation of the power of mercy. The world is a lullaby, and for tonight, the song is one of safe harbors, unwritten tragedies, and the infinite, enduring beauty of a peace that chose to stay. We leave this act behind, moving softly toward the final sunset of our journey. But we take the echoes with us, a quiet treasure to be kept in the heart. The silence is full, the hearts are at rest, and the world is safe in the hands of the quiet. The path of the pause has led us here, to this moment of profound, rhythmic grace, where the only thing that matters is the steady, peaceful beat of a world that is still breathing. The sun is the only thing allowed to set in a world that never learned how to fall. As we reach the final shoreline of this long, drifting journey, the sky over the Pacific has become a vast canvas of bruised plums, liquid gold, and the softest, most delicate lavender. There is no smoke on this horizon, no silhouettes of rising fire, no jagged lines of metal tearing through the clouds. There is only the slow, rhythmic exhaling of the tide, a sound that has remained unchanged through all the years of the great pause. It is the breathing of a world at rest, a world that took a different turn at the crossroads and found its way into a long, golden afternoon that shows no sign of ending. We have walked through the rooms of power and the quiet alleys of forgotten neighborhoods, and at every place, we found the same secret. We found that the greatest victories of humanity are the ones that leave no scars. We have seen the diplomat's brush, the one that chose the word for patience, now resting in a velvet-lined box, a relic of a moment when the world stayed its hand. We have seen the bread in the galley of a ship that remained a home, and the paper cranes that carried the wishes of a child into a sky that remained clear and blue. These are the artifacts of our alternate history, not shards of steel or ruins of stone, but the soft, enduring textures of a life that was allowed to continue. The ocean before us is a mirror of the infinite. It stretches out toward a horizon that doesn't mark a boundary, but a bridge. In this world, the Pacific did not become a graveyard, it became a shared garden of water, a place where the currents carry messages of trade and friendship instead of the cold weight of grief. The ships that move across its surface tonight are lit from stem to stern, their amber glows reflecting in the swells like fallen stars. There is no need for shadows here. There is no need to hide. The light is a gift that belongs to everyone, and it is used to guide the traveler home, never to find a target. I want you to think about the people we have met, one last time, as they too look toward this sunset. The young sailor from Nebraska, who is now an old man with a house full of grandchildren, still has that first letter he wrote on a quiet Sunday in Honolulu. The ink has faded to a soft brown, but the words are still there, words about red birds and hibiscus and the smell of the rain. He lived to see those red birds again. He lived to see his mother's garden in the spring. His heroism was simply to survive, to grow old, and to tell the story of a morning that remained a morning. The mother in Tokyo, who once watched her son sleep behind a screen of rice paper, is now a grandmother who teaches the same boy's children how to fold paper cranes. Her hands are gnarled like the roots of an ancient pine, but they are steady. Her son did not go to a front that didn't exist. Instead, he built the bridges and the libraries of a new age. He became the architect of the silence. Every time she looks at him, she feels a quiet, rhythmic peace, a realization that her vigil in the moonlight was not in vain. The shadows on her walls remain just the shadows of trees, and for that, the world is infinitely richer. There is a unique kind of resilience in a peace that lasts this long. It is the resilience of the mundane. It is the strength required to keep the tea warm, to keep the letters moving, and to keep the conversations going even when they are difficult. We have seen that the path of the pause was not an easy one. It was a road paved with the exhaustion of diplomats, the patience of sailors, and the quiet fears of millions of mothers and fathers. But they held the line. They held back the tide of the what-if with nothing but their own humanity. They are the quiet heroes of the infinite horizon, the ones who ensured that the history books would be filled with stories of festivals and harvests instead of battles and loss. As the light fades, the stars begin to emerge, one by one, appearing in the darkening dome like old friends returning from a long journey. They look down on a world that is safe. In the small towns of the American Midwest, the uniforms and the trunks are now just curiosities, relics of a time when the world held its breath. The dust on them is the dust of a peace that was never broken. In the rubber plantations of Malaya, the psalm of the trees continues, a slow, liquid melody of growth and endurance. The wooden birds carved by soldiers are now toys for children who will never know the meaning of an occupation. The Great Pause has become the Great Peace. It is a world characterized by a beautiful, lingering melancholy, the knowledge of how fragile this all is, and the profound gratitude for every day that it holds together. We have learned to find the sacred in the ordinary. We have learned that a cup of tea shared between rivals is worth more than 1,000 territories gained. We have learned that the most important thing a person can do is to be a witness to the beauty of a quiet afternoon. The horizon is now a thin, silver line between the indigo of the sea and the velvet of the sky. It feels as though we could walk out onto the water and keep going forever, following the path of the moon. This is the promise of the what if. It is a world of infinite possibilities, where the story doesn't have to end in fire. It is a world where the future is as wide and as bright as the ocean itself. We are all travelers on this horizon, moving toward a morning that we know will be kind. I want you to feel the weight of this peace in your own heart. It is a soft, rhythmic weight, like the pulse of a sleeping child. It is the feeling of being tucked in, of being guarded by the silence. The world is a lullaby, and the song is one of safe harbors, long lives, and the infinite beauty of a choice. The diplomats have gone home. The ships are at rest. The ovens are cooling, and the ink is dry. Everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. The ocean continues to breathe, slowly, deeply, peacefully. In and out. In and out. It is the heartbeat of a world that was spared. Every splash of a wave against the shore is a thank you to the hands that stayed the brush. Every rustle of the wind in the palm trees is a blessing for the letters that were allowed to arrive. We are the inheritors of this silence, the guardians of this dream. And as we close our eyes tonight, we do so with the knowledge that the horizon is clear, and the morning is a gift that we have already received. The light is gone now, replaced by the soft, blue glow of the starlight. The world is wrapped in a sanctuary of shadows, a place where the only things moving are the dreams of a billion souls. We leave the pilot on his deck, the nurse in her ward, the fisherman with his nets, and the president on his porch. They are all at rest, and so are we. The story of the Great Pause is a story of love, written in the margins of a history that chose to be gentle. It is a story that has no end, for the horizon goes on forever. Sleep now, in the arms of the infinite. The tide is in, the stars are out, and the world is at rest. The silence is not a lack of life, it is the fullness of a life that was allowed to stay whole. The lullaby of the Pacific is playing just for you, a song of mercy and of home. The horizon is yours, the peace is yours, and the morning will bring nothing but the soft return of the light. The world is a lullaby. The dream is real. And for tonight, and for all the nights to come, the storm has passed us by. We are safe in the heart of the great perhaps, and the horizon is, as it always should have been, infinite and clear.